make a start. There's no fire alarm drill anticipated today. So if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building through the nearest fire exit by following the running man signs above the doors and make your way to the rear of the car park. The organiser of the meeting will tell you when it's safe to return. Toilets are available in the stairwell of the building at each floor landing. Water is available from the water cooler in reception. And finally, please make sure all phones are either muted or switched off. I shall just do mine now while I remember. So good morning and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting on Tuesday the 19th of November 2024. There we go. I'm the Chair, Councillor Ollie Davey. To my right is the Vice Chair, Councillor Matt Hall. Supporting officers present today are Wendy Ormsby, Development Manager, Damien Hunter, Planning Solicitor, oh he is here, and Amanda Coombs, Democratic Services Officer. Presenting officers for today's applications will be Jamie Quinton, Jill Himsworth, Wendy Ormsby, Liam Fisher and Lynn Schwen. The meeting today is being streamed live to the Council's YouTube account, so can I remind all members and officers contributing to the meeting to use a microphone or your comments will not be heard. We'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members and declarations of interest. And I'll just advise on behalf of the committee that in respect of item number 12, 232166 MOUT, the land at Gilbrook, that I've been lobbied, and I'm assuming the rest of the committee have been copied into emails generally about the road safety there. So I've advised that on behalf of the committee. Okay, so over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Starting with yourself, and if you could also give a declaration if you have one. Councillor Davey.
Present and just that lobbying in respect of item 12.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Bailey, Brian Bailey.
Present. Nothing to declare.
Councillor Barlow.
Present, thank you, and nothing further to declare.
Councillor Bloxham.
Present, thank you, and nothing further to declare.
Councillor Colin Brown.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Jenny Brown.
Present, nothing further to declare.
Councillor Sarah Chamberlain.
Apologies. Yeah.
Councillor Maddie Chapman.
Present and nothing further to declare.
Councillor Peter Faithfull. Councillor Haggerty.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Hall, Anne Hall.
Present, nothing to declare, thank you.
Councillor Howell.
Apologies for this morning.
Councillor Simon Smith. And Councillor Eileen Wagg.
Present, nothing more to declare.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So agenda item 1, the registered speakers for today, they can be found on page 4 and 5 of the agenda. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting, pages 6 to 9. Is it members' wish that as chair I sign the minutes of the meetings or meeting held on the 22nd of October 2024 as a true and accurate record? Can I ask you to raise your hands if you're happy with those minutes? That's fine. I will sign those then. Agenda item 3 then, we have apologies. What number of those?
Yes, Councillor Gazzard and the two that came up during the roll call, Councillor Howe and Councillor Chamberlain. Are there any others?
Was there anybody else? No. No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Declarations of interest we've done. Matters of urgency, there are none. Agenda item 6, to agree any items to be dealt with after the public have been excluded, none of those today. So agenda item 7, planning appeals statistics, pages 10 to 28, and we have an update from Development Manager Wendy Ormsby.
Good morning. So in terms of the appeals, I think the things of note, we've got the appeal decisions in for the change of use of land for the purposes of parking associated with existing operations at Hill Barton Business Park. And there's 2 appeal decisions there. The first one on the list is regarding the refusal of planning permission for a temporary period of 3 years for this retrospective application. And I think we did touch on this actually at the last meeting, but effectively the inspector found that the site was not a suitable location for this type of development, and that there was harm to landscape and also harm to neighbour amenity. However, the inspector gave weight to the fact that he felt that it had been demonstrated that there was a shortfall of employment land. He took the view that this was likely to be addressed through the emerging local plan, but in the immediate term, there's a shortage, and therefore it was appropriate, he felt, that that demand or need outweighed all the other harms arising from the development. So that was allowed for a temporary period of 3 years. The inspector commented that he expected that at the end of that period, the shortfall would have been addressed through the emerging local plan. And then there was a follow-up appeal because there was also an enforcement notice regarding that unauthorised development at the site. The appeal on the enforcement notice was just focused on whether or not the period for compliance was unreasonable, and the inspector concluded that there was no evidence given to demonstrate that the terms were unreasonable, and so the enforcement notice was upheld. But whilst the enforcement notice was actually upheld, the grant of the temporary planning permission effectively overrides the enforcement notice at present. And then looking through the remaining decisions, I think what's notable is that if we're looking at 222582 FUL, which was an application that came to committee at Barnard's Harepath Hill on Seaton, which was for a single dwelling. So that was an officer recommendation to refuse and refused by committee. That appeal was allowed, the inspector taking the view that he felt that notwithstanding the fact that there were no actual footpath links, that he felt that it was acceptable for people to be walking along that rural road, and therefore there was access to local services. And then as you go through the appeals list, and we get, I think, particularly to the end of that list, and we're looking at, for example, 232548, change of use, Ivy Green Farm, which was the change of use of an annex accommodation to holiday. The next one, which was land west of Backwells Mead, which was a planning in principle for 4 dwellings. And then the following one, Kilmore House, Poltimore, Exeter, which was outline application for 6 dwellings. All of those were refused where those grounds of accessibility, safe access to local facilities by the inspector, was upheld as being reason to dismiss the appeals. So what we do see in these is that we don't always get consistency in decision making in appeals. I mean, obviously every site is taken on its own merits, they're not all identical, but it is interesting to see the interpretation of different inspectors in terms of what is a suitable site for development and what isn't. I've Unless there's anybody's got any questions, no other comments to make. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Faithful, welcome. Do you have any interest to declare?
Not other than the second application is in my ward.
Okay, thank you. I think there was some lobbying in respect of the one in Woodbury, but I've declared that on behalf of the committee anyway. So, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to our first application for today. That's planning application 240721 FUL, land northeast of Grange Close, Lympstone. That can be found on pages 25 to 52 of the agenda. And we've got Senior Planning Officer Jamie Quinton, who's going to present the report on this one. Over to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. The first item of consideration today is an application for the construction of 2 dwellings at land northeast of Grange Close, and the application is before you all today as the application is a departure from the local plan. There's only the one update on this one this morning, so we have considered the submission of a construction and ecological management plan, which has gone before the district's ecologist and which has been found acceptable. So condition 7 at the end of the report for this one will change from a pre-commencement condition to a compliance condition.
Can I just get you to hold on for a minute, Jamie, while we get the application?
Carry on, Chair. We'll work in progress.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, I'll stop interrupting then.
I don't think they realise that we need the screen shared.
Oh, you know, we need the screen,
The officer's screen.
Oh, I see.
No, just need to share. You need to share.
oh, okay, we need to share Jamie's. He's got the application there. That's what we need to see, thank you. Okay, Jamie.
So the application site is a small irregular shaped parcel of agricultural land accessed off Grange Close, which, if I get the point over here, we see that? Yeah, which is here. Many of you may recognise the site. The applicant has already secured outline consent for the construction of a single dwelling, and this went before planning committee back in August of 2023, where members resolved to approve the application, agreeing with the officer's recommendation. For those of you who also sit on strategic planning committee, you also will recognise the site as it came forward as an allocation as part of the core sites of the emerging local plan. So it originally came in for 6 units, but was dismissed with concerns over ecological impact and the site's access. It was considered whether or not it would be heard again for 3, but that would bring it below the threshold of 5. So yeah, the site was dismissed altogether. In terms of some of the spatial constraints, the black line here is the built-up area boundary for Lympstone, which is through Strategy 27. The application site is bordered, but is not within the coastal preservation area, and that is the blue hatched line on your screen. And due to the application site's proximity to the Harefield stream, the very southern part of the site is within flood zones 2 and 3. So the application site is considered to be well related to existing facilities and services within the village, in addition to public transport links. There's bus stops along Exmouth Road, and the village also has a train station. So despite not being considered in accordance with the local plan policies or the strategic approach to housing of the local plan, the application is considered to perform well against Strategy 5B and TC2. So on your screen now is the submitted site plan, which shows how the two two-story dwellings would be orientated in the site. The light green shaded rectangles are the attached garages with cedar roofs. You might just be able to make out some of the contour lines on the site plan, but just for members to note that the land does fall away quite quickly from the northwest to the southeast. A couple of properties that are worth making note of is number 10 and number 12 Grange Close, and also the Acons, and we'll touch upon them a bit later on. So on your screen now are the submitted elevations for plot 1. So as mentioned, they're to be 2-story in height with attached garaging. The external walls to be finished in a mix of brick, oak cladding with aluminium framed openings, and artificial slate is proposed for the roofing with black Lindab guttering. So for completeness, here's the elevations for plot 2, which does vary slightly in its form. In particular, I'd like to draw members obviously to the full height openings on the rear, and also that each dwelling would be served by an air source heat pump attached to the garage. So I'm just going to run through some site photos. So this picture is of number 9 and 11 Grange Close, which are elevated above the level of the road, and these are constructed, as you can see, in a mix of render, cladding, brick and tile. And as you move around the close, the access to the site is just in the left-hand side of the picture there. So here we've got number 10 and number 12, which are larger properties set within slightly larger plots, which again are constructed of brick and tile. Slightly different in character due to the extent of the roofscape there and its low eaves line. But the purpose of the pictures are really to communicate to members how the character of the close itself changes with regards to density, form and materials. But despite the scale of the two dwellings that we're currently considering, whilst they're obviously increase in terms of their built form compared to what you can see in the close, they're set back behind these properties that immediately front the roads. They wouldn't be viewed in context of the street scene. So this picture is of the access into the site. So as mentioned right at the start of the presentation, it was considered that 6 dwellings here wouldn't be appropriate or appropriate level of development to be served by this access. However, we have consulted with the County Highway Authority, who deemed that the application for 2 dwellings would be acceptable. So all of the following photos are taken from within the site. So this is looking, I'm stood within the site looking down towards the southeastern boundary, which you can see is characterised by mature trees and hedgerow. This photo is looking up to the northeastern boundary. So as members can tell that at the moment the site is offered extensive screening by the mature tree line around the northeastern and eastern boundary. So this photo is looking up to the northwest, up to Rest Harrow, which you see the gable end here, which fronts Strawberry Hill. So all of this vegetation along the boundary is to be retained alongside some additional native hedge planting. And this photo here looks towards the boundary shared with 12 Grange Close. So looking in the same direction on this photo, but back towards the access, and I think just gives you a good idea of how the levels within the site change. And this photo again, as you can see by the little cropped image in the bottom right corner, is looking towards the boundary which is shared with the Acorns. So this photo again is taken on the access road, so we're looking over the side garden of number 10 Grange Close. and just to give you an impression of what the relationship would be like, so we've got existing vegetation here which would help screen development, although you would just see the pitched roof of plot 1 from this position. So on your screen now we've got a series of sections which show the extent of engineering operations required to cut the plot into the site. And on the site plan here, there are some distances annotated between the first floor elements of the scheme and the nearest boundaries. So the boundary that members will want to consider is this one along here, which is shared with number 10 and number 12. So the first floor, the closest first floor part of plot 1 would be approximately 12 metres from the boundary which is shared with number 10. There are a pair of high-level windows on this elevation which will be obscured via condition. And then here, this rear protruding part of plot 2 will be approximately 20 metres from that shared boundary with number 10. And then we've also got the acorns to the south, where the boundary shared here is 30 metres from the nearest first floor window of plot 1. So these are the floor plans for plot 1, 4-bedroom property. Those windows that I referred to just a second ago are these two here, which serve the en-suites. And also those full height windows which have outlook towards the boundary of acorns is this one here. And these are the floor plans for plot 2. So the application is supported by a fully detailed planting plan. There are, I think it's about 11 small trees which are to be removed on the site, some due to their health, others because 2, I believe, which are required to be removed in order to facilitate development. Replacement planting is located predominantly in the northeastern corner along here, alongside a series of native species hedgerows which are to enclose the site and also enclose the boundary between the two properties. So the application has received comments from third parties with regards to the level of surface water runoff that is expected to be generated by development, and in particular this runoff into the Harefield stream. The applicant has undertaken percolation testing and has demonstrated that soakaways wouldn't be feasible, and therefore the development would be served by a pair of detention basins which are indicated under these depressions within the rear gardens. So we've consulted with South West Water, and the use of detention basins where soakaways are not possible would be in accordance with the drainage hierarchy, and that's reflected within their comments. Because of the concerns raised by third parties, we also approached the local lead flooding authority, but they're not interested in providing comments on a development of this scale. But we have also discussed this with the Environment Agency as to whether or not the development may cause flooding elsewhere, and they've come back and said that they have no objection to the scheme, are satisfied this development, and in particular the surface water generated would not cause flooding elsewhere. So just to summarise, I've included another aerial image there of the application site in its context. So whilst the proposals do propose 2 dwellings of a scale and form which vary from that seen along Grange Close and Birch Road, its position of officers that the development would still meet the the design policy within Lympstone Plan, the Lympstone Neighbourhood Plan, which is Policy 7, which requires the proposals to be individual in design, not interrupt the existing street line, should incorporate native hedging to boundaries, and also provide or implement carbon reduction measures, and that's seen obviously within or is reflected within the provision of the air source heat pumps. So, as members are aware, whilst we are currently in a position where we don't have to apply the tilted balance, there's still a need to provide market and affordable housing within the district. And given that it's already been accepted that this is considered a sustainable location, as shown when the application last came to committee, it's the position of officers that the application is acceptable in terms of its proximity to services and facilities, despite the identified conflict with Strategy 7 and the Villages Plan. So overall, it's recommended the application is approved, subject to adoption of the appropriate assessment and subject to the conditions listed at the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very full report there. Excellent. Okay, we'll move on then to the objector, Clem Davis, and I think, Amanda, you've got a statement to read for us.
Yes, I have, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this planning application. I'm writing on behalf of Lympstone Water Quality Group. The location of this proposed development is immediately adjacent to the Harfield stream, which is highly vulnerable to any polluting discharges due to its low base flow.
Just move the microphone a bit closer. I think some of our members are struggling.
How's that? Yeah. Right, where were we? Base flows. The stream then discharges into Wootton Brook and onto the Essex estuary, which are both sensitive watercourses. Water pollution from urban development is now well documented, and given the above, the inherent water risks associated with this proposed development are high. There is no evidence of a robust water pollution risk assessment or adequate pollution prevention controls during both construction and long-term occupancy of the properties. For example, the proposed retention ponds have been designed primarily for flood risk purposes, not water treatment. To protect the water quality in the stream, you would expect to see a forebay of sediment settlement, some permanent water, and other methods to ensure adequate bioretention and degradation, all of which must be maintained in perpetuity. The foul effluent pump system will also increase water pollution, and there is no information on how this will be maintained. Overall, the planning
Get it a bit closer, Amanda.
Overall, the planning application does not conform to 1. The National Planning Policy Framework, Section 15, paragraph 180E, which states clearly that the planning decision should prevent development from contributing to water pollution and should, wherever possible, help to improve local environmental conditions such as water quality. Number 2, the East Devon Local Plan Policies EN14 on the control of pollution and EN18 on the maintenance of water quality. Number 3, the Sustainable Drainage System SUDS Manual C753. There is also no reference to compliance with the environmental permitting regulations. Based on current design, an environmental permit would be required for the drainage discharge, since without adequate treatment processes, this would be contaminated. In conclusion, based on the current information available, I consider that the planning application should be refused.
Thank you. Okay, and we also, I think, are going to hear from the agent, Hannah Cameron of HC Planning Limited.
Good morning, members. I speak today on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Ian White from RBL Homes, in relation to this application for 2 dwellings. The applicants, RBL Homes, pride themselves on delivering high quality builds and have previously successfully delivered 2 schemes in Limpstone, including the Gatehouse at Limpstone Manor and the very sensitive Limpstone nursery site, where they worked closely with the parish, the council and the residents. RBL specialise in delivering and bringing to the market high quality self and custom build homes, and the dwellings have been designed to be unique and will complement the variety of architectural designs in Limpstone. The proposed dwellings will be highly sustainable with efficiency close to carbon zero. The design incorporates solar panels with battery storage, air source heat pumps and electric vehicle charging points. Despite the majority of the site falling outside of the built-up area boundary of Limpstone, it is located where it's well located in terms of the services and facilities within the village. An outline planning permission was previously granted in 2023, as we've heard from your officer. The proposal seeks to optimise the site, and the submission has included detailed strategies for landscaping, the protection of the existing trees, ecological management and enhancement, foul and surface water management, as well as a construction management plan and ecological management plan to manage the development of the site and ensure that the environmental and ecological interests are protected throughout the build. The applicant met with all of the adjoining neighbours prior to the submission of the application, and I note that there are no objections from the immediate neighbours. There are also no objections from your statutory consultees. As we have heard, the Environment Agency have confirmed their content with the surface water drainage strategy, which comprises of the detention basins with a controlled outflow to the nearby watercourse. This would not increase flood risk elsewhere, and the discharge rate is limited to 1.5 litres per second, the practical minimum that is achievable. This is in accordance with the Environment Agency's guidance. The detention basins will act to improve the water quality of the surface water runoff, and the submitted details include the long-term maintenance and management of the foul and surface water drainage systems. The construction and ecological management plan also sets out the environmental commitments for the management of pollutants during the build process. Granting permission for this high-quality residential development will assist in boosting the overall housing supply in the area and should be given significant weight in the overall decision. I'd like to thank you for your time, and we hope that you'll support this application in accordance with your officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Hannah. Before you go, could I just ask a question? It's about foul sewage. I understand it's going to be pumped up to the nearest sewage connection.
Yes.
Is there any kind of backup plan or contingency plan should that pump fail?
So there is a detailed maintenance strategy for this, and it will be linked with a sort of ongoing, there will be commitments to an ongoing overseeing of the maintenance, as well as an emergency process for any issues with this. So that will be all sort of part of the eventual sign up for the end users of the properties.
Okay, thank you. So there's no backup pump or anything. It's reliant on regular maintenance.
As I understand it, there's no backup pump designed in the system at the moment, but there should be controls in places that should this fail, it sort of automatically triggers someone to come out and check the system and ensure that there isn't a backup.
Okay, thank you. Right then, I don't see the ward members here, so I'm assuming we're not going to hear from them. They have submitted comments which are in your agenda papers. So we will move on. Councillor Faithful. Questions first, if we may.
Can we know who the trees for screening belong to? Because I would imagine they're on a bank. Are they, banks usually are one side or the other?
Are you able to answer that one, Jamie?
So a number of the trees that you saw in my site visit photos taken, they're all on the application site side of the stream, which I think probably denote where the ownership lies. So if I go back to the planting plan, so there are on that boundary along here is characterised by a number of mature trees, which fall within the application site, so are in control of the applicant.
There's no trees between the new houses and the present dwellings, the bungalows?
Along Grange Close? Yeah, so bear with me a second. So that boundary you refer to, Councillor Faithful, is this one along here. So it looks like a substantial conifer hedge and also another tree just on the right hand side there. And that looks like, to me, like it's in the application site.
So basically it's up to the new residents whether the trees stay there or not. That's the thing.
Well, the development would have to be carried out in accordance with the arboricultural report and also the landscaping scheme we've got in front of us. That tree is not proposed for removal, and any landscape would have to be kept for at least 5 years. Also, I think there's also provisional TPO being placed on the site as well, so any works to the trees would have to have prior consent. Yeah, sorry, Hannah, you want to say?
Thank you. Right. Any further questions? Councillor Barlow.
And then me.
Thank you, Chair. Could you say, is this, does this pay sill because it's a self-build? I wasn't quite sure if, because I noticed it's down as a self-build, both of them, and therefore they're exempt from certain biodiversity net gains things. But does it still pay sill?
Yeah.
Provided they go through the right process.
Yeah, as long as they fill out the right forms, go through due process, then self-build is exempt from SIL as well.
So you're comfortable that these are both going to be built by people that are going to live in them? Obviously they have to live in them for a certain amount of time, but then they don't pay any SIL, they don't put anything into the pot for their local community, the infrastructure or anything else this. And I know it's the law and we can't do anything about it. Also, the other thing I wanted to ask is, because there's no biodiversity gain, is it in our powers to insist on certain things that we want, i.e. bat boxes, bird boxes, bee boxes and grey water systems, or not?
So, in response to your first point, we have attached a condition to ensure that these do come forward as self-build properties. You're right, they're exempt from BNG, but in terms of providing bat boxes and all the necessary habitat mitigation, that is detailed within the protected species report, and how some of those mitigation features are implemented on site are also captured through the landscape ecological management plan. and also how some of those habitat features are protected during the construction phase is also detailed within the construction and ecological management plan. I think it's probably important to note that the applicant has provided a lot of technical detail up front to try and to appease some of these concerns. So we're comfortable on those matters, yeah.
And these are the same people that are going to live there? Sorry, well, you're saying that these are involved in this. These are the builders, the people that are going to live there, because this is a self-build.
Well, the technical reports were provided by the applicant, and the developer will be liable to obviously implement those features.
Okay. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions, if I may. First one, apologies if I've just missed the link, but within the submitted documentation online is an appeal decision for 67 homes at Marnow in Dorset. I can't quite see the link between that and this, if that could be explained. Second question is, as shown in the photos you put up, the access is very narrow. The block plan didn't seem to show any turning circles, so how are we expecting refuse to be collected from the 2 properties? And finally, looking at the submitted floor plans, it does appear that the double garage, the actual garage door, appears to be very narrow to be able to get 2 cars in and out. Are we sure that the double garage can actually function as a double garage? Thank you.
So in response to your first question about the Marnow appeal, that was scanned in during communications with the agent about the council's position with regards to its 5-year land supply and whether or not we had to engage the tilted balance. So as mentioned at the start of the presentation, we are currently in a position where we are not applying the tilted balance, but notwithstanding that, the recommendation is still to approve. The second question about access.
Yeah, how...
Refuse.
So in terms of bin collection, we anticipate that occupants of the properties would move their bins up to Grange Close, forward of the access point. In terms of the access itself, as I said, I appreciate that when it came forward as an allocation, there were concerns raised over access, but that was obviously a different scale of development. I think in this, comparing 6 to 2, there is a difference. And in this case, as I said, the County Highway Authority are happy with the access arrangements.
I think there was another question there, Jamie.
Yeah, so in terms of what the site plan shows, we're happy that there's sufficient turning there so vehicles can access and exit in a forward gear, and also that it provides sufficient parking for the dwellings. I mean, as long as the garages are sufficiently wide enough for 1 car, we wouldn't raise any objections in terms of its width.
If I could just come back on that, Chair, I'd just, I'm just mindful that, when we approve a double garage, that in essence they should function as a double garage. And personally, I wouldn't want to be the person reversing the second car into that garage. So I was just wondering, are we happy with those dimensions? If you're happy, then that's fine.
It's our position that local plan policy requires for a dwelling of this scale to provide 2 parking spaces, and we're happy that that can be achieved outside the footprint of the garage. So we wouldn't necessarily insist that the applicant demonstrates that the garage, because it's been labelled as a double garage, can fit 2 cars in. It meets our parking policy of the local plan, so that goes far enough for us.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Anne Hall and then Councillor Peter Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. One quick question about the landscape planting scheme. We look like in an ornamental garden, you're using natural planting, which has to stay there for 5 years, but it's not very, I would say, if it was actually in the hedgerow, that's fine, but in the ornamental garden, you've got things which are going to grow and not give much in the way of colour, etc. And some things are going to be very slow growing. And there's also, on the drive side, you've got climbing hydrangeas and ivy going nowhere. They haven't got a wall to climb up that I can see. And if they've got to adhere to these planting schemes because it's in the actual document, I think it needs to be revisited.
Okay, we'll take all those questions together. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Air source heat pumps connected to a garage. When I had my place assessed, I thought they wanted to have, you don't want to lose heat from the inside, so the tank and things wants to be somewhere where it doesn't want to be exposed, I thought. So I'm not sure a garage is the right place to put an air source heat pump on the outside to then connect to something that's virtually out on the outside, on the inside, in your garage, because that's how garages are not insulated, are they? I don't know.
I think we probably have to assume that they know what they're doing in installing heat pumps. I'm not a heat pump installer, so I couldn't comment on that, but I think we heard that they have built several homes in Lympstone already, and presumably those have something similar in the way of air source heat pumps. So I'm guessing attaching it to a garage, you provide some ducting. Yep, you know something about air source heat pumps, do you, Ian?
Well, just how they work. At the end of the day, as long as the tube is insulated that goes to the building where the hot water's got to go, it doesn't matter whether it's a boiler outside or a condenser as this is, whatever, how they work basically. It's the machinery that's outside. It doesn't need to be insulated in any way.
Okay, thank you. I'm guessing they've just moved it a little further away from the house and attached it to the garage rather than to the house, just to keep the noise levels down, because I understand they can be a bit noisy. Councillor Jenny Brown.
Okay, just a couple of points. The size, what's the square footage of the properties? And is this predominantly a bungalow estate?
Okay, so we had 3 questions there about the planting. I think Peter's question about air source heat pumps may have been answered by another member of the committee, and a question about the sort of volume of these homes.
Yes, and also the position of the air source heat pump is also partly to ensure that any sound generated or they're in a position that doesn't adversely impact the living conditions of any adjacent neighbour or the occupants of the other plot. Going back to the question on the planting scheme, so the plan has 2 functions. It's to provide adequate replacement planting, which the tree officer has seen and found acceptable, and its second purpose is also to provide the ecological enhancements, which again has been for our ecologists and been found acceptable. I take the point about the nature of the planting and if they're climbers, they need to be appropriately located, but their maintenance would be down to the discretion of the future occupants of the site. I don't think it's something we would kick up a fuss about at this stage.
Can I come back on that one, please? Just to say that if they've got to do this and then it's down to the residents, then that is a waste of planting because they'll have to be ripped out and they've got to keep them there for 5 years. That's what this says. So we really need to get this right in the first place, in my mind, because it's a waste of plants. And carbon footprint, because those plants have got to be actually produced and shipped there. Thank you.
I think you should be offering your services as a consultant to the planners on how to come up with a good planting scheme. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, given your background, I understand why you've looked closely at that. Okay, so we'll go into debate now if there's no further questions. Oh, Councillor Brown. Oh, yes, we needed to hear about the footprint of the buildings and the floor area. I think it is the case that most of the other buildings around there are bungalows, although given the sloping nature, it could be that some are bungalows and then actually incorporate another story down below. It's all quite hilly around there. We're trying to find a figure for you, but you stumped us there. How are we doing there?
I could just come in,
Yeah. We might as well break the silence. Councillor Hall.
I was just going to say to Mrs. Ormsby that it would be, I think, really handy for the committee for applications where there are new dwellings, if it could be noted what the floor area is. Because obviously as councillors with iPads, we don't have the ability to measure the plans. We don't have Nitro Pro or anything like that to do it. But also with these, and I think most members I would have thought have found this, with these iPads, if you try to enhance or have a closer look at the plans, it just goes all blurry. So we can't actually see the numbers sometimes. So perhaps it would just be a helpful thing for the future. Thank you.
So it's annotated on the floor plans. So this is the gross internal area for house 1 is 412 square metres. And for house 2, it's 431.
Make of that what you will, Jenny. Yeah, you can tell from the plans that they are quite sizable. They certainly wouldn't have fitted 6 of those in, so I imagine the original 6 would have been a much smaller. Well, they are self-built, and therefore people, have specific kind of things that they want to see in those. Self-built, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean you lay every brick yourself, Well, that's, yeah. Okay, so with no further questions now, we'll go into debate. Anyone have any opinions on this or like to make a proposal? If not, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I'd say they are very big executive houses. It is just on inside part of the boundary. It's one of those. It's had permission for one. This is doubling it, 2. My question is, or my observation on the conditions, 4C, it says no burning shall take place in a position where flames could extend to within 5 metres of any part of a tree to be retained. I believe we shouldn't allow any burning. So could we actually, if we do approve it, actually alter that to no burning on site, full stop? Thank you.
Okay, I'll just check with officers whether we can include that as a condition. I'd be happy with that, actually. I don't see any need for burning. They could cut it up and take it elsewhere if there are small trees being taken down and so on. And take it to Greendale, get it processed. Well, cutting down trees isn't sustainable, and burning it definitely isn't.
So yeah, we would be happy to amend that to no burning during the construction phase.
Okay, thank you. Good point. Councillor Hall, Barlow.
Thank you,
It's
Chair.
Ian.
Thank you, Chair.
We do have an Ian Hall, and I just...
The only thing I'll say is that they are big houses. Do we feel that the garden is big enough for these? I mean, it's when you look at how steeply it's sloping off there, I know the side plan looks like it's a very gentle slope, but your photos are showing it's quite steep. And is it usable by the time you've got the attenuation ponds in there, etc.? Is it sort of about the right size for the right size pots? Otherwise, I don't like the fact that they are self-build. I think that's just a way of not paying SIL and not contributing. And if you think about that, that's at 440 square metres, that's about £40,000 that SIL will be missing out on. But otherwise, I don't suppose I have any issues. We've already, as you say, passed for one. Swings and roundabouts, I suppose. I don't like the fact. I think it's avoiding your social responsibility and getting 2 houses squeezed on something that only a year ago we said we were pushed to pass 1.
Well, as I say, we have had an application for 6 at one point, so they clearly thought they could get 6 on there, which fortunately was rejected. But I think, they have adequately demonstrated they can get 2 homes on there. I agree with you about the gardens. I wouldn't want it because I would want more garden, but it's not everybody who wants gardens. and they're well screened. They've got quite a bit of quite nice planting around there. So perhaps they're happy with that. I don't think there's any figures about any conditions that we can put on. And with regard to the sill, I would say, we don't just take people's word for it, or it's self-build. I think officers have to be satisfied that it is genuinely self-built. And I'm assuming that we have gone into this and ascertained that there are applicants who are requiring these homes. I mean, basically it means they have to be pre-sold, and the developers are in consultation with the people who are going to end up occupying them and building them to their bespoke requirements. Is that the case, Jamie? Can I just check that we do go into this?
So for sill exemption, then that's a separate process, because the fact that the planning stage, they say they're self-build, they would need to apply specifically for the self-build exemption prior to commencing development. And there are elements of proof that they have to demonstrate to show that there has been that genuine involvement, and it might be self-build insurance indemnity, for example. It might be invoices that have been submitted to the builder, etc., that the applicant has paid. So there's various ways that our SIL team will require proof that it has been brought forward as a self-build. And obviously, with self-build, to get the SIL exemption, it has to be occupied for a minimum of 3 years. So we do endeavour to monitor and see whether the properties, for example, have been sold on within that 3-year period, to see whether or not there is, because of this, there's the clawback, that if they don't follow through with that, the SIL then becomes liable. But there's the separate issue now of the BNG exemption, and that doesn't have the same layers of present. The laws do not require the same level of proof, but we are now adding the self-build conditions on, because without that, then different criteria would be required at the actual application stage.
Thank you. In which case I will support the application and propose it, if you want.
Okay, thank you. I was going to do that from subject to the alteration in condition 4 to not permit any burning on site. And I don't think there was any other.
Well, condition 7 has got to be updated as well to a compliance condition.
Okay. Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Haggerty, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy with the design. I was actually going to propose it ahead of Councillor Barlow. Happy to second it with conditions of the officers, especially with the no burning. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Wragg.
Chair, I'm quite concerned about this one. It's a departure from the local plan and also the Lympstone neighbourhood plan. What's the point of having these plans if we're just not going to follow them? It's usually the committee who breaks with these policies, but this time it seems to be officers. I think if we make the policies, we should stick with them. I don't think I can support this.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before we go to a vote? Okay, in that case, we'll go to a vote.
Can I just interject very quickly
Yes.
and just double check? I'm assuming as well that that's to adopt the appropriate assessment as part of that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you, Damien. There are 2 recommendations, aren't there? Okay. Councillor Faithful.
Well, in response to councillor Ragg's comments, normally you go outside the boundaries for social dwellings of some description, and this isn't. This is completely the opposite. These are huge. They're not affordable or social. They're just expensive houses. So I'm rather inclined to support councillor Ragg with that.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a fair point. It is a departure from the local plan. They are outside the built-up area boundary. However, it is felt by officers that they relate reasonably well to the rest of the area. They're in a sustainable location. And I think sometimes where we're just touching the edge of the built-up area boundary, we are inclined to bend the rules a little bit on that one. But I think yeah, I mean, there is a fallback position there, if you like. But that's, as you point out, that is only outline permission for one house. Okay, so if there's no further comments, then we'll go to a vote. Damien? No? Okay. All in favour then? Okay, I think we're looking at 4. Those against? Ooh, 7. And are you abstaining, Matt? And 1 abstention. Okay, so that one falls. Okay, is everybody happy? We've been going about an hour. Shall we move on to the next one, or do you want a comfort break?
We haven't determined it yet.
Oh, sorry.
We need a proposal and reasons.
Sorry. Well, so, yeah, I am. Yes. Okay. So yes, that falls. So we now need a proposal, presumably, to refuse. Councillor Ragg.
Yeah, I propose to refuse.
And on the grounds that it's not compliant with the local
Departure
plan.
from local plan and the Lumsden neighbourhood plan.
I think it is very important to bear in mind we have recently accepted the principle of residential development on this site. There is planning permission for a single dwelling. So we'd have to see why is 2 dwellings materially different to 1 dwelling in terms of the matter of principle of development.
Okay, Councillor Chapman.
I agree with what Eileen says. It's also on 2 sides, part of 2 and 3 on the floodplain and also water runoff.
Well, I think we're on pretty shaky ground there. The buildings are not in flood zone 2. Well, we don't refuse them because part of the land is in the flood zone, unless it would result in cutting off the buildings. One corner of the site is in a flood zone, but the rest of the site is flood zone 1. So I really don't think that is an adequate reason to refuse this. And the surface water runoff, it has been demonstrated it can be dealt with. The Environment Agency have raised no issues with it. The Flood Agency haven't. and the attenuation ponds, all the figures we've been provided with assert that they are within Environment Agency levels.
Thank you, Chair, but I disagree.
On what grounds?
On the grounds of what's happening in Exmouth with the Withy Brook and all the development and the water going down there. Now the bridge is disabled down in town. And I think unless we pay more attention to where the water is going in these brooks, we're on a very, very slippery wicket.
I don't think we can refuse an application because of what's happening elsewhere. Anyway, moving on, Councillor Brown.
Overdevelopment. Yes, I was going to say that.
Okay, overdevelopment of the site.
Microphone.
Sorry, overdevelopment, and it's also can only be given a limited weight at this stage because we're at the earliest published version of the local plan.
Okay, but I think the principle of development has been established by the fact there's an outline planning permission already granted for one dwelling. So I think it's not to do with a local plan, although that was mentioned, that it's also been, well, it was put forward as a site for the local plan. I don't think it's actually in there now because it falls below the threshold. But the principle of development has been accepted by the fact that there's already an outline planning permission.
Yeah, but then there's access into. Sorry. Access into the site, which we don't think is sufficient because you can't get anything around there to turn round. And also the fact that they've removed the grade A oak tree from the site to get 2 units on.
Yeah. Yeah, again, preemptive removal of trees is not something we want to see, but again, it's not, unfortunately, a reason for refusal. But certainly access too narrow and overdevelopment of the site, we perhaps do have a stronger case there. Councillor Ragg, you have something?
Yeah, Chair, I'm sorry, I haven't brought my local plan with me, but D1, out of context, design, is it massing? It's there in policy D1.
So not, yeah, it doesn't respect the local characteristics of the area. Because these are large 2-storey houses compared with the bungalows that generally characterise the area in that part of
I think the only reference that I could see to outline having been granted was in Livingston Parish Council's comments. It might be in there somewhere, probably is, and I might have missed it.
Okay, I imagine it's in the history of the site. Okay, so Mrs. Ormsby, do you think we've got sufficient grounds for refusal here?
Well, of the grounds discussed, I think the one that could potentially withstand any cost claim is the grounds of overdevelopment. Well, having regard to the design scale and massing of the proposal, it represents an overdevelopment of the site out of character with the area. I don't think any of the others relate. I mean, access. We've granted planning permission for a single dwelling, so the access for refuse would be the same for that dwelling as it would be for 2. So I don't think access. There's no objection from the highways. I don't think we would stand much chance of defending a refusal on the grounds of access. So I would recommend, if members wish to refuse this, that they stick with that single reason for refusal.
Okay, councillor Ann Hall.
Thank you, Chair. The outline application, was that given because of the tilted balance that we didn't have 5-year land supply at the time that was actually proposed? And would that have a bearing on this? Thank you.
So yes, at the time, we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply, but it is still nevertheless a valid planning application that this is extant. So we can't ignore the fact that that permission exists.
Okay, so shall we go with overdevelopment of the site then? And policy D1, that it doesn't accord with local designs there. Okay.
Chair,
yes.
Do we actually have a seconder for that? Because I know Councillor Ragg's
did we have a
proposed it.
proposal?
Well, Councillor Ragg proposed it, so if Councillor Ragg's happy with that amended proposal of overdevelopment of the site and the design and massing being contrary to policy D1, large 2-storey building which doesn't respect the character and appearance of the area, are you happy with that, Councillor Ragg?
Yep.
Yep, so we need a seconder for that and then we can do a vote.
There's
Councillor-
also, I think there's a policy in the Lympstone local plan. Policies 5 and 6 seem to deal with density and scale, so we could quote those.
Which is the kind of general design policy of the neighbourhood.
Policy 7 in the
Neighbourhood plan, yeah.
in the Lympstone neighbourhood plan as well. Yeah. So D1 and policies 5, 6 and 7 of the Lympstone neighbourhood plan. Okay, do we have a seconder for that then? Sorry, Colin. We were just trying to ascertain where we'd actually got to. Okay, in that case, we will go to a vote then. Those in favour of refusal? 7 again. Yeah. Those against? 1. Those sorry, 2. Sorry, Kim. And abstentions? 3. Okay. So that one is refused. Okay. In that case, shall we take a short break as we've put that one through the ringer? I thought that was going to be a quick and easy one. We were worried we might finish too early this morning and be left drumming our heels for a couple of hours before the afternoon, but such is not the case. Okay, just before you go, we'll say 10 minutes, please. So we'll have you back before past, please. Okay, members, if we can take our seats. Well, I managed to do one so far, so we'll move on to agenda item 9. This is planning application 241278 FUL, land adjacent to Upper Spilsby, Exeter Road, Ottery St Mary, pages 53 to 84 of your agenda pack. And Jill Himsworth, hello Jill, is going to present the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this application before you is at Exeter Road, Ottery St Mary, and it's before Planning Committee as it represents a departure from the local plan. The proposal is for a standalone house, which is proposed under the exceptions, paragraph 84, under the National Planning Policy Framework. So in terms of the site location, it's just 2 miles west of Ottery St Mary and approximately 300 metres southeast of the A30. The site is this site in the centre of the screen, outlined in red, and it's approached along a lane to the north of the site, and the access is in the northeast corner. That's a more detailed photograph of the actual site. This is looking from the south of the site, and the site, you can just see there's a faint red line outlining the site there. It's surrounded by lots of mature beech and oak trees, some of which are protected by tree preservation orders. And the site is not subject to any landscape designations at all. So that's a very outlined block plan of the proposed site. The house is not quite as big as that block plan would lead you to believe. It's an L-shaped house with a porte cochere over the driveway. So the house is actually an L-shaped house. The site is very slightly sloping down towards the southeast. And bearing in mind the nice views, the house has been planned as a reverse level house, so there's bedrooms to the ground floor and then a large open plan living space to the first floor of the house. And it's been designed as a contemporary and minimalist country house, which is designed to integrate into the landscape through a series of planned views out into the landscape and from within the landscape back towards the house. And that's an image taken from the site looking out. You've got a very long range view of the sea and also out to Peak Hill at Sidmouth. So alongside the proposals for the house, there's also been a very detailed landscaping scheme produced, which has got various different aspects to it, which link into the design of the house as well. There's Devon orchards proposed, Devon hedge banks, lots of vegetable planting. So it's all very much picking up on the local distinctiveness, using locally distinctive trees and varieties of apples. And also water has been incorporated into this design, both as a design feature and also as a sustainability feature of the building. So in terms of the planning policy position, the MPPF states that planning policies and decisions should avoid the development of isolated homes in the countryside unless one or more of the following circumstances apply. So paragraph 84E states that the design is of exceptional quality. So I'll come on to that shortly, but first just one of the other criteria of the policy is that the dwelling has to be isolated. And in terms of the isolation, there's been relevant case law about that, the Bramshill case. So although the site isn't completely isolated in that there are dwellings around it, it is isolated in that the site is not close to a settlement. Therefore, in planning policy terms, the site is considered to be isolated. So going on to the design criteria that have to be met in order for the policy to be fulfilled, the MPPF states that the design is truly outstanding, reflecting the highest standards in architecture, and would help to raise standards of design more generally in rural areas. And the design would significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the local area. So the design has been presented to the local design review panel 3 times. So that's an independent panel that sits entirely separately from the council, which consists of a multidisciplinary panel of architects, landscape architects, ecologists, mechanical and electrical engineers. So they've reviewed the design 3 times, and the last occasion was in April 2024. And at the last panel, the design did conclude that the design was exceptional and of a good enough standard to meet the criteria of the National Planning Policy Framework Policy. So this is the ground floor of the dwelling. So as I said, water is a big theme that runs through the building. So the water collects on the roof, and this is the front door. It travels down chains, and then this water travels all the way through the hall of the building, and then this carries on into the landscape design. And then there's also a reflecting pool along the south elevation of the building, which these buildings look out onto. So this helps with privacy. It creates a calming environment within the house. It connects the site with nature. And in terms of the construction of the building, the ground floor is constructed of hemp, which is a low carbon material similar to cob, but slightly different, which I'll come on to later. And the ground floor elevation facing south is concertinaed, and that also ties in with the landscaping design for the site. So this is the first floor for the scheme, which in contrast to the ground floor and its relatively solid walls, this is conceived of more of a lightweight timber pavilion. So this will be constructed of glass and Devon oak, and the oak continues not only through the external elevations, but also into the interior of the scheme as well. And the design of the baffle on the outside, you can see that the oak columns are quite irregularly spaced, and that is intentional as a means of reducing the traffic noise from the A30. So we've got a series of photo renders of the building. So this is a view from the entrance, and you can see the ground floor walls. So the hemp walls would be finished in a hand-floated lime render. And then you've got the Devon oak frame above. So the colours very much reflect the site context. They're very natural. And there you can see the reflecting pool. So you've got the ground floor bedrooms that look out onto the pool. So you'd have the reflections on the exterior and coming into the interior of the building. And then that's an image coming up to the drive. So from the drive from the northeast, vehicles would go into the porte cochere, which is a kind of, it's not covered, but it's a kind of enclosed parking area at the rear of the house, which is also landscaped, and it's got trees inside it, so it's very much an external space. So there's just some detailed images of the this image on the right-hand side is the ground floor of the building with the lime rendered walls looking out onto the reflecting pools, and then also the kind of the effect of those pools on the lighting on the interior. So it's a very calming space. And again, there's the Devon oak going through into the first floor of the house, being used in the walling to baffle the sound and in the ceiling joists. So in terms of the landscape design, which is a significant element of the proposal, the site, the landscape character type is in the pebble bed heaths, which is characterised by having lots of beech and oak trees, which is picked up in the design. And also the underlying geology of the site has also been picked up in the proposed landscaping scheme. So the design basically hinges around, you've got a kind of circular walk, and also you've got these planned views out from the house into the landscape, and also planned views back to the house as you walk around the site. So there's lots of new native tree planting proposed, 66 trees in total, as well as 18 indigenous fruit trees proposed for the site. That's the wildflower and grass seeding plan. So there's various different wildflower mixes proposed, which will be attractive for the site and also highly beneficial for ecology. The hard landscaping uses recycled Plymouth limestone in the footpaths and the driveway. In terms of the water scheme, so water will run off the roof. It will come through the building. There's attenuation tanks under the building, and then it will also be filtered through these ponds in the reed bed filtration system. And the water will be used, recycled as grey water within the building. And in addition to this, there's also a wildlife pond, which is on access with the front door. So when you walk into the front door, you'll see these ponds, and you'll see right down to the wildlife pond, which would enhance the setting and the biodiversity of the site. There is currently an objection from Exeter Airport in respect of the potential hazards of bird life and the pond. They have asked for a wildlife hazard plan to be carried out. We have added this as a pre-commencement condition to any approval in order that the risks can be minimised. The applicant have prepared a detailed statement from their ecologist in terms of the design of the pond, which says that because of the planting around the edge of the pond, which will discourage bird life, and because of the size of the pond is not particularly significant, that the proposal wouldn't increase the risk of bird life beyond the existing background risk on the site. However, this has not been enough to allay the airport's concerns, and therefore the pre-commencement condition is proposed as a measure to alleviate the airport's concerns and make sure that a plan can be put in place to reduce the risk of any birds on the site. So that's a cross section through the building. So it has a flat roof, and obviously that allows the area of the roof to be maximised. So you've got maximum area for the photovoltaic panels. You can see the attenuation there running under the building, and there's a circular roof opening which allows light down to the front door. And then just running through a series of elevations. So that's the entrance elevation. So you drive under here, and there's parking in the garage. And then you've got bedrooms on the ground floor, and then the open plan living space above. Again, the south elevation. So you've got this concertinaed south elevation, which frames the views out into the surrounding landscape. So the hemp, it's relatively similar to cob, which is obviously a local material, but unlike cob, hemp sequesters carbon when it's grown. So that helps to make sure the building would be carbon neutral. And then the hemp is mixed with hydraulic lime, and there's various different construction methods. The building would also use low carbon concrete, and the oak for the framing would be locally grown, and all of this would be controlled by condition to ensure the finished quality of the building and that it is locally distinctive. The house will be designed to passive house standards, which means it will have high levels of air tightness and low thermal bridging. The house will use a wastewater heat recovery system, so any wastewater from shower water or bath water will be recycled in the house. It will use a mechanical ventilation and heat recovery system, so any waste heat that you would normally lose through bathroom vents and cooking vents, you won't lose that heat. It will go straight back into the house. There will be a ground source heat pump, so that's different from an air source heat pump in that it's embedded in the landscape and uses the ground as a heat source. The solar panels on the roof will generate 27,000 kilowatt hours per annum of energy, so the building would be a net exporter to the grid. There is a plant room in the building, so there's various different methods of power storage proposed in the building. The building would use Tesla lithium-ion batteries. So they're not a particularly new technology, but there's other newer technologies proposed alongside those. There's proton exchange membrane fuel cells, and also phase change materials, which is a material that changes from a solid to a liquid depending on how much energy it's stored within it. So these technologies would be on the roof or within the plant room, and again this would all be included within the conditions to make sure that the building was constructed as per the submitted details. In terms of the biodiversity of the site, the building is a self-build, but it is over the 0.5 hectare threshold. So biodiversity net gain provisions would apply to the site. So the proposals would increase biodiversity net gain on the site by 10%. However, the way the legislation is drafted is that gains within private gardens are not included, as they cannot be guaranteed. So the applicant would also have to secure a 10% improvement off-site, as well as the landscaping works that they're carrying out on-site in order to meet the biodiversity net gain requirements. So as a result of this, the proposal would result in significant biodiversity net gain enhancements, even though the enhancements on the site can't be included for the measurement purposes. So this is a schematic of the grey water recycling in the building. Roof would be treated by UV and silt filters before going into the pools within the house and within the reflecting pools. And the water supply for the house would be via the existing borehole, with the water being collected off the roof being used within the house as grey water. So to conclude, we consider this as a very highly considered proposal, which uses locally distinctive materials. It would result in a very highly crafted building with low carbon and a low energy building using new technology. It would result in a high quality contemporary country dwelling grounded in its setting, which would enhance the site. And with the recommended conditions in place, the proposal is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Jill. This is only the second I can remember in 5 years, five and a half years as a councillor, so it's quite interesting to see these come forward. Okay, we hear from the agent now, Jonathan Finch. Oh, could you switch the microphone on?
There we go.
And you have 3 minutes.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jonathan Finch. I've been the planning consultant throughout this project, and I speak today on behalf of the applicants. Tim and Libby Reid are long-standing local residents, being born in Exeter and have lived at Spilsby for 19 years and having set up and run local businesses. This application is the realisation of their dream to build a multi-generational home for their retirement. This is, however, no ordinary vision, but one to deliver a home of the highest quality with the lowest environmental impact. In recognition of the high bar set by paragraph 84 of the NPPF, the applicant has positively and proactively engaged with the council and the design review process, presenting to the panel on 3 separate occasions since December 2021. This extensive process of expert review and refinement has culminated in a proposal of design integrity, with its intellectual rigour commended by the design review panel. As such, it's been confirmed by both the panel and today's officer recommendation that the design is truly outstanding and meets the NPPF exceptions. The principle of building a new home on this site is therefore accepted. The Weir House is deeply rooted in its setting, using natural materials of hempcrete and timber to echo the site's meadows and trees. It draws inspiration from the tumbling weir in nearby Ottery St Mary and its historic connection to the Otter. As such, the house engages with water beyond its traditional application, recognising its sensual qualities in reference to sound and light, utilising it in innovative ways from spatial organisation, providing noise mitigation, to site-wide grey water harvesting and recycling. The integration of water throughout the building and into the landscape gardens, and the conscious choice of materials which are part earth and part trees, much like the site itself, will embed this house into its context, amplifying and celebrating the locally distinctive qualities of this part of Devon. The landscaping has evolved hand in hand with the architecture to create an intimate relationship between the internal and external environment. The meadow gardens will deliver significant biodiversity enhancements and are organised to create framed views into and out of the site and into the countryside beyond. Through the construction phase, the use of hempcrete will provide learning opportunities to further understand and advance sustainable construction techniques, contributing to wider sustainable development goals. The home will use photovoltaic technology and heat pumps to generate renewable energy on site with battery storage, with the building mass itself creating a thermal store. As such, its operation will be incredibly efficient and sustainable. We have engaged with the airport and their concerns are acknowledged. The applicant has agreed to provide the requested wildlife management plan prior to commencement by way of condition to ensure any risk is fully mitigated to their satisfaction. In summary, the proposed development has been informed by a rigorous and comprehensive understanding of the site's context and defining characteristics, and is grounded in the principles of delivering a new dwelling of exceptional quality that is truly outstanding and reflects the highest standards in architecture. Finally, both the applicant and the wider project team would like to thank officers for their positive engagement from the outset and throughout the lengthy design development and determination process to help achieve this. We welcome the panel's consideration of these proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we're, oh yes, ward member. Vicky Johns, please. And you've got 5 minutes, Vicky.
Good morning, Chair and panel committee. So this application lies within my ward of Ottery St Mary, and I object to the application due to a number of reasons. The application lies within the open countryside where new residential development should not be and cannot be justified. This application does not fall within the government guidance as set out within NPPF paragraph 84. Special circumstances allow for new residential homes to be built within the countryside. A is there is an essential need for dual workers accommodation on this site. Doesn't fall into that. B, the development would not represent optimal use of a heritage asset. No. Development is not going to reuse redundant buildings. It doesn't. The development isn't going to involve the division of existing residential buildings. It doesn't. E is the only one that it could possibly, but this one is the most difficult as it is exceptionally subjective. The design is of exceptional quality and would enhance the surrounding area. As I've previously stated, this is highly subjective, and what one person group may consider is of exceptional quality, another person may not. I don't believe this should be the reason why a house should be built in the open countryside, going against all other policies, including the neighbourhood and local plan for the area. Due to the subjective nature of the decision, it's down to basic taste, whether you like the house or not, and I don't think that's a good enough reason for it to be built in the open countryside. The site itself, as is stated in the reports that we've received, is isolated and will require transport to get to and from anywhere, including the doctors, schools, local amenities, etc. The access would be along a road with no footpath and no provision to be able to put one in. During a time where we have called a climate emergency and are trying to actively encourage people to walk or cycle, etc. There's also no provision for the bus to stop along that road because it's an exceptionally busy road. Exeter Airport have raised significant concerns and these must be addressed. I'm aware an ecologist has prepared a statement in response However, Exeter Airport have maintained their holding objection, and I believe that as the experts, they should be listened to. I have noticed in the officer's report that condition 12, I believe it is, they would need approval in writing, but I think that should go to Exeter Airport before it goes to the local authority, as they are the experts in whether or not birds will flock, etc. I live in an area where we've had, believe it or not, ducks living in our garden. We have no pond. We have a stream that runs near us. We have no pond. If there's water this much, ducks will flock around it, and they will all take off together at the same time, regardless of what else is going on. I also noticed within the planning application that it states that there is provision for 2 parking spaces in the application. However, on the planning application photos that you showed just now, there's provision for 4, 2 in the garage and 2 next to an electric charging points. So I'm assuming that there's 4 car parking spaces, and we're aware that it's a 5-bedroom property. For the grounds above, I object to this application, as I feel the application does not qualify under the exceptional quality rule due to this being highly subjective, and it does not qualify under any other special circumstances in paragraph 84 of the NPFF. And it goes completely against the local neighbourhood and local plan for Ottery St Mary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johns. Okay, so we'll start with questions. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I think it comes down obviously to paragraph 84, whatever. Truly outstanding. And I just wonder why we think it's truly, I know it's subjective or subjective, whatever, where everyone's opinion is slightly different, but I've looked at the technology, it's all right-ish. Hempcrete, yes, but again, all right-ish. The amount of carbon that will be used to build it will not be outweighed by what we're doing there. I went out to the site, I didn't go on the site, but I looked at the site. It's very noisy out there. I don't think, the views, again, they're nice views, but they're not outstanding, truly outstanding views. And I just felt that, really, is this the best we can do for truly outstanding? I didn't find it, I just didn't find it. And I wondered why you think it is truly outstanding compared to other buildings that we pass as a normal building.
Do we have any more questions just before I ask officers to respond? Councillor Anne Hall.
Thank you, Chair. One question, how large is that pond? Because all the finer detail we cannot focus in on. It's also blurred. You can't look at the planting schemes, nothing. So we really haven't got full information there because you just can't zoom in on it. But how large is that pond? Thank you.
I thought there were some figures in the report for that, but I'll let officers deal with that one because they've got better knowledge of it than I have. Any other questions? Councillor Faithful first, and then Councillor Rapp.
Thank you, Chair. This field, is it still, as far as I can see, it's agricultural land. Is there any reason why it would be anything other than agricultural land?
Okay, and Councillor Ragg.
Yeah, reflecting pools. I thought all pools were reflecting. They all reflect light. Could somebody clarify what a reflecting pool is, please?
Okay. Oh, Councillor Anne Hall.
Sorry, just one quick question with regard to the solar panels. They were saying that they can export, but have they actually contacted National Grid to get permission to export, and at what rate? Thank you.
Okay, I wouldn't have thought the level at which they're exporting would cause National Grid any issues, given that they're using battery storage. This is not a large solar farm, you know, this is just...
Even domestic, you can be capped to just 3.68, your normal small inverter size. This is a passive house which won't be using a lot of electric when it's generating in the summer. So, yeah, your batteries will fill up quickly, but where does that surplus go? And that was one of the things it would be helping with the eco side of things for actually exporting. But you've got to have that permission to export, because you cannot, at times, they cannot accept it because of the locality of the area.
All right, well, we'll hope somebody can answer that question. Okay, got a list of questions there for the officers. Councillor Jenny Brown, one more.
Yeah, it's showing, is the roof see-through, or are we just looking at part of the building that is like a wraparound veranda? I'm not too sure on that bit, 'cause I can see through the roof.
No, some of the illustrations are a bit confusing, yeah, I'll let officers answer that one. I think I've got a handle on that, but I'll let them answer. Deal with those things.
In terms of the design, I agree, it is very subjective. The MPPF states that in paragraph 135 that the local authority have to have regard to any findings of any design review panel. So the fact that the design review panel have stated that the design does meet the requirements is a material consideration in our assessment of the proposal. And in terms of the more detailed aspects of the design, there's many different threads to the design in terms of the materials, the landscape design, the setting, the response to the local distinctive qualities of the site. There's many different things that have been incorporated into the overall proposal in coming up with a scheme. It's been through many different reiterations in arriving at this design. So I agree, it is a very subjective process, but we do have to take the design review panel comments into consideration. Going on to the other questions, the pond, I think the pond area is 96 square metres, and it also has a 6 metre timber jetty extending out over it. So I think the total area is approximately 90 square metres in total. And I agree, we would look to send any wildlife hazard management plan to the airport for their input before that is agreed with them. The land at the moment is not in agricultural use, it's part of the existing owner's garden, as far as we're aware, so it's not in agricultural use. The reflecting ponds, their location immediately next to the building means they'll bounce light back into the house. In terms of the overall landscaping design, they provide privacy to the bedrooms so that people using the terrace aren't able to look right into those bedrooms. And it's just an attractive feature of the design, the kind of calming aspects of water, the attractiveness of the reflections of the light bouncing into the house is all part of the design intent to create a calming house with links to nature and the site. In terms of the design of the roof, it's solid over the house, and then the porte cochere at the rear of the building, it's not solid, it's just a framework. I'm not sure whether we've actually got an image of that. Yeah, so I think this one shows it quite well. So this is the porte cochere, so it's open. That's the annex apartment at the end, and then the rest of the porte cochere is open. You've got trees growing in here, and then again over the first floor balcony, it's open. So the roof is only over the accommodation at first floor level.
Chair, if you don't mind, if I've just to clarify, because I could see some people looking in potentially at the MPPF when Ms Hemsworth was talking about the MPPF reference. The para is 138, not 135. And what it says in paragraph 138 is that local planning authorities should ensure they have access to and make appropriate use of tools and processes for assessing and improving the design of development. Goes on to say, for assessing proposals, there's a range of tools, including workshops, to engage the local community, design, advice and review arrangements and assessment frameworks such as the Building for a Healthy Life. And then it goes on to say, in assessing applications, local planning authorities should have regard to the outcome from these processes, including any recommendations made by design review panels. So that is something that we do need to take into account. And I think that is reflecting the fact that I think there is a general acknowledgement that design is always going to be subjective. What one person finds beautiful, another person may not. And that's why there is the recommendation to use a design review panel to get an informed view of appropriately qualified people. So we do need to have regard to the fact that they have concluded that in their view, this proposal does meet those very high standards set out in paragraph 84 of the MPPF, which would allow a dwelling in the countryside under those exceptional circumstances.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back on that point?
Just before we do, have we answered the question about whether there's adequate or whether National Grid has been contacted with regard to the additional?
I'm not able to answer that question. I don't know whether the planning consultant could answer that for us.
At this stage, I'm not aware that we have contacted the National Grid, mainly on the point that we have not got planning permission at this stage, and I'd be surprised if the National Grid would engage in discussions on exporting without certainty over the development coming forward. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Okay, further questions? Yes.
Just about this design. So the second part of E in 84, whatever it was, that the house would significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to the defining characters of the local area. Are we saying that we are taking the people, these design thing? And again, I've read through the plans, whatever, on the application, where we've gone to these design people. And obviously they've gone back several times. There's 2 lots in there where they've said, well, it isn't, and you need to change X, Y, and Z, and they kept going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. But I can't see anyone in there that actually says, yeah, this is wonderful, and it's brilliant, and all the rest of it. There seem to be more questions in there of what the problems are with it, but maybe I just haven't seen the right thing. But certainly, are you saying that this design company has also said that it would significantly enhance its immediate setting?
Yes, they have. On the last visit to the panel, which was in April of this year, the panel did respond and say that the design met the criteria, and that is included within the planning submission.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I agree. The appearance of the building is subjective, and it doesn't particularly appeal to me, although I can see that that is a question of taste. I find contemporary buildings don't always appeal to me, but then contemporary buildings in 50 years, 100 years' time will no longer be contemporary, will they? And maybe the way all are built. But I think we have to bear in mind the other features of the construction, the passive house standard, the use of solar, grey water. There's lots of things here we'd love to see on all houses, and that is often where they're looking for local examples that we can point to and say, well, you need to go and have a look at that house. Not that all houses are going to be built that way, because the cost of this I just cannot begin to imagine. But that's not our concern. But I think we do have to consider aspects of the design which are not necessarily subjective. That there are features there that are unquestionably environmental or otherwise challenging, new and different, that you can't argue about. But I agree, the appearance of the building, that is subjective. But there's no doubt it's a contemporary design, and it's, to my mind, quite an interesting one. And I think even the illustrations don't always give an idea of what it'll look like in the context. Do we have, any further questions? So we're still on questions, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we can't say no to loss of a view. Is there any reason why we should give planning permission for gaining one?
Okay. Councillor Wragg, Eileen.
The image of the building itself, can we have a look at it? Can you call it up, please? No, that one. Is that what the finished structure is going to look like?
So that's the east elevation.
Sorry, it's the
east elevation.
Huh.
I think what these images don't show, unfortunately, is the landscape design integrated into the overall site. I think in terms of the rendering of the images, they just show the building, and obviously the building would be sat in a much more green landscape setting than these images convey.
Because I'm just looking through, you can see the sky through the timber struts. I don't see the point of it.
It's the design is to create a contemporary country house, and so the scale of the kind of entrance at the rear of the dwelling, it's a porte cochere, kind of covered, well, it's not covered, entranceway, which the design review panel felt gave the building an appropriate scale for its setting. So it just wraps around and continues the materials around the site.
Chair, if it's okay, just coming back on the point that Councillor Faithful raised about gaining a view. When you think of historic country homes, the majority of them will have been designed in their landscape setting, often with things like ha-ha features leading out, focusing on distant, beautiful views, and that's very much part of the setting and the context of what makes those historic country homes special. And so that is part of the thought process, the design process of this building, is not just to set it within its, the immediate, that red line boundary, but looking at how it sits within the wider landscape. And those outward views are part of what is important or can be important in the overall design concept, as I said, as demonstrated in many historic houses that we've all been to see with National Trust properties, etc.
Okay. Right. Any further questions before we go into debate? Okay. Well, let's move to debate. Councillor Hall.
Sorry.
Something still got. Oh, it's Eileen. Eileen.
Sorry.
Turn the mic off.
Sorry.
Sorry, it was just one quick question about the main road. I know that road is horrendously noisy. Even I live 2 miles away from it. And that was, when it went in, it was disturbing. What are the decibels actually outside in the garden? Or in that field as it is at the moment? Because that, if you're saying it's about setting, if it was in a setting elsewhere without that noise, I can see it ticking more boxes. But because it is where it is, right beside that main road, I really consider a very limiting use of that outside part. And how much does, and also what's the noise level inside with the wooden baffles to try and absorb that noise? Thank you.
I think there is some tree screening which presumably helps to some extent, but I agree that it is a particularly noisy stretch of the A30. And I know people who've lived much further away who've complained about the noise levels. So I suppose our concern is for the amenity of the occupants, particularly when they're using the outside space, which presumably they would want.
Indeed, and people, when it was put in, actually were given compensation 2 miles away from that road.
Yeah.
So the design of the building has been orientated with the living spaces placed away from the road, looking out away from it. Environmental health have not raised any objections to the site in respect of the noise. So we haven't, no formal undertaking of the actual noise assessment has been carried out. The applicants live closer to the road than this house is, so they are familiar with the noise effects from the road.
I think having spoken to people who live close to roads, they tell me that they just don't notice it after a while. I rejected one house that I was thinking of buying because of the noise from the M5, and that was about a mile away. So I can understand that, but people in Topsham tell me that they just don't hear the M5 after a while. So people do get used. Councillor Brian Bailey, did I see a hand up there?
Sure. My question is, this is in the open countryside. How far is it? It's a multi-generational house, which would imply there'll be children in there, which is fine. How do they get to school? Is it within walking distance, archery and school and various facilities?
I think it's
And are there
2
footpaths?
miles.
So I'm not familiar with the area, so I want to ask the question.
It's 2 miles from West Hill. I don't think it is. I mean, I would say that's cyclable. I don't know.
No footpaths along there?
Do we know if there's any footpaths?
So that might make it unsustainable, because we're supposed to be encouraging active travel.
I would agree, but this is not in a sustainable location. It is, and we're not suggesting that it is. However, the NPPF makes very specific provision. So this is a site where we would not normally approve a new dwelling because it's an unsustainable location in the countryside. However, the NPPF says that if, as you've heard mention, a dwelling is brought forward that is of outstanding architectural value, then there is provisions for it to be permitted. So the issue of whether it's sustainable isn't part of the assessment today. What members need to consider is whether they think that the design of this building is of exceptional quality, in that it's truly outstanding, reflecting the highest standards in architecture, would help to raise standards of design more generally in rural areas, and would significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the area. That's the question that members need to be considering in terms of whether or not they feel that they want to support the officer recommendation for approval.
Just use the microphone, Brian, please. Yeah.
I understand what you've just said. However, in general terms, this, you said yourself, would be deemed unsustainable. So because a group of architects have decided that what a wonderful building is, that's their idea of things. It's probably not ours. I'm not saying maybe, it may not be. But because they think it's a wonderful building, therefore the aspect of not being sustainable is thrown out of the window. That doesn't make any sense at all.
We are following the policy guidance set out in the National Planning Policy Framework, which is very clear, and this is in situations where this is specifically for considering proposals in isolated homes in the countryside. So I think it's a given that it's not going to be a sustainable location if it's an isolated home in the countryside. It is that issue that we need to consider. And in terms of what weight we give to this external body, this design review that have made this, they've come to the conclusion after sort of nearly 3 years of ongoing debate, they have concluded that it does meet those requirements of being truly outstanding. And the NPPF does say that we need to give weight to the outcome of those design review panels.
Are we,
Okay. Ian?
are we in debate now, Chair?
As far as I know, we're still on questions.
When we're in debate, I'm ready to debate, Chair.
Okay. There's no further questions then. We'll move into debate. Fire away.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's interesting that again, look, I've looked through, I can only find 2 things from the design panel there, and both of them are lots of questions. But one of them was from 21, even though it was only put on to the portal in this year, June. So anyway, but the ones I can see, it's very much backwards and forwards. It's not, but obviously you're saying the last one that came through that I can't find says it is. But obviously the reason that they're saying this is exceptional is mainly due to the carbon savings, the passive house, the battery storage, the solar, and the rest of it, which is saving carbon. But at the same time, this isn't outstanding. So the views from it are all right, but not what I would call, it's not you said about the ha-has and the old houses of the old days that were done spectacularly. Capability Brown built gardens around the views, whatever. This isn't that. There is very distant views of the sea, and if the trees grow anymore, you are not going to see a lot of it anyway. Certainly the setting for peace and quiet, I went up there, as I said, stood at the back of it and looked across it. It's noisy. The people that live nearby might be used to that, but we must look at the future people that might want to live here. So, from my point of view, I don't think that would be a peaceful place to live. And certainly you're not going to change that by a few bits of wood carefully angled, I don't think. Not that amount of noise, because I was stood in among trees and I could still really hear it. Also, it's an upside down house. And again, this is an area that has got a lot of trees around it. And because it's upside down, light at night that would normally be spilling out and it's going to be up in the trees where the bats fly around, all the rest of it. And I just wonder if that's more dangerous, more damaging for the wildlife, etc. Certainly, it's on the path for the extra airport, so again, more noise. And again, the second part, and I said it before, the second part of this design quality would significantly enhance the immediate setting and be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the area. It isn't. It doesn't matter what anyone says. You can't say that a green field that's surrounded by trees is enhanced in any way by that. I'm sorry, but there isn't anything. No one could tell me that an expert can tell me that enhances the natural beauty of an area. So I think it fails on that. Whether it's truly outstanding, again, I would love to argue with the designers on whether it's true, but I can't do that because they're not here. And I can't read their final thing. I haven't seen it. So I, for one, could not support this just on the things that I don't believe it is. It is subjective, and I would happily argue with a designer, although I might agree that the bits in the building are great. Some of them might be truly outstanding, some bits of it, but I don't think there is enough there
that would overall compensate for the damage you were about to do. And again, for the carbon that you're saving, you're going to be spending more of that. And again, it's the embedded carbon we do now. We're trying to save carbon now. We're trying to save carbon in the future as well, but we are pouring an awful lot of carbon into that building. I know you're going to say, oh, the what's it called, hempcrete, whatever, is going to save and store some carbon in that. But that isn't true, because even though it's low carbon concrete, there's still going to be carbon embedded in there. You've still got to deliver it wherever it's going, unless they're going to grow it in the field next door. All the workmen, everything that's got to go to there, then all the schooling, etc., because it's it just doesn't add up in my mind. And I think at the end of the day, this isn't something we should do. Otherwise, I think we're going to have a lot more of this sort of thing.
Have we actually had a carbon audit to show how it will achieve zero carbon? I mean, some of that is presumably achieved through the lifetime of the building as well, in the carbon savings there.
And that's the point, Chair. You're putting the carbon in now to hopefully save it in the future. But at the end of the day, you've still got to spend an awful lot of carbon now, which is the thing we are supposed to be saving now.
I think we approve a lot more developments that are much higher carbon than this one. You know, they've done everything they can to minimise the carbon. I agree, you know, there's bound to be a carbon cost here, but I think they've done everything they can to minimise that, which is more than most developers do. But take a point, and it's still an exception to the local plan. It's in the open countryside. I would imagine, given the type of building and the fact it has electric car charging points, that occupants might well be using electric cars and probably generating their own power to power those up as well. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Matt Hall and then Councillor Peter
Sorry,
Faith.
can I just
Oh,
respond
yeah.
on the carbon,
Oh, yes, carbon audit.
question?
Yeah.
There are carbon figures included within the application for both the construction of the building and for the building in use. And in terms of the standards that the building is aiming to achieve, it's aiming to achieve the RIBA 2030 carbon standards for construction and in use.
Thank you, Jill. Councillor Matt Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I think I understand what the applicant is trying to achieve. But I think, as Councillor Barlow pointed out, you know, this in essence is a house that is almost certainly going to have multiple occupants over its lifespan, and we have to be mindful of that. As I think has been said several times today, you know, in general, this is totally contrary to our policy. There are many applications, for example, that some of us would have liked to have approved over the last 6 months, but couldn't because it's not a sustainable location. So I think what that means is we have to be 100% sure that this is exceptional. No offence to the designers, but I look at that elevation that's on the screen, and I got a funny feeling if you showed that to any member of the public, they would ask, what's it going to look like when it's finished? I'm sorry, but that's just it. I think in essence, I don't believe the design of that building is exceptional, and I appreciate that that is very subjective. I think in many respects, the landscaping is exceptional. I've spent a lot of my life working in horticulture, and I think that's really good. But I think, as has been mentioned, and as I know personally, this is an extremely noisy area. When the A30 was built and they made that judgment to do it mostly in concrete, the noise and the problems that that created for many people rumbled on for years. And you can have the best designed garden in the entire world, but if it's too noisy for you to enjoy, it loses in my opinion, any of its gain. Ooh, I would have liked to, and personally I would have expected to have seen some form of noise impact assessment that actually addresses the real life and the background noise of this, because in essence this is being billed purely that, you know, don't worry about policy, this is exceptional, and the exceptionality comes in the building and it comes in the grounds, and I personally would have expected to have seen that. I just cannot support this today for two reasons. The first one, as I've just mentioned, but the second is, and I personally think that this is quite important, the concerns which have been raised by Exeter Airport with regards to birds are, let's face it, about health and safety. I would expect that to have been dealt with before. I would not expect that to be conditioned or any pre-commencements, because in essence, to potentially satisfy the airport could lead to quite a dramatic change in the landscaping design. And bearing in mind, part of assessing the exceptionality of this is the landscaping, I think it works hand in hand. So, sorry, Chairman, a bit like Councillor Barlow, I cannot support this today.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Peter Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. When I was looking at this, I did check on my ordnance survey map. I don't know where they're measuring from, but my measurements from the site to the dual carriageway is 220 metres, not 300 as they suggest. I don't consider the view they will be having is anything out of the ordinary for the Otter Valley, the Sid Valley, and most of East Devon. So there's nothing special about it. So I don't see why. And as it's a subject we cannot refuse for loss of one. I don't see why they should have one. You know, all these grand houses were built in a different century, let alone what's going on now. So we're here and now. And as others have said, I don't feel it's an interesting subject and it's interesting conversation having, but I don't consider what is being presented to us is sufficiently exceptional. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't think the views have to be outstanding in order to qualify. I don't think it said it had to have outstanding views. I think it was just that it contributed to the local environment. But take that point, and certainly I imagine in the old days, you know, the landowners would have had the road moved. I think they did at Killerton, didn't they? Got the road moved. They certainly, so some of them, did achieve extraordinary things in order to preserve their views. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've been sitting here looking at this building, and suddenly the coin dropped in my mind. Where have I seen this building before? Every time I visit my youngest granddaughter, who's just 10, and she's been building buildings like this for years. It's Lego. And that's what it is. It's exactly the same as a child will build out of Lego. No offence to the architect, but that is how it comes over to me. And I've tried to absorb the alleged good points, and I can't see any. So I'm afraid that I can't support it, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll just remind you that the design review panel did not take that view, but I agree. A lot of contemporary homes do reference Lego, I would say. Councillor Eileen Wragg.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. This reminds me of Hans Christian Andersen and the Emperor's Clothes. I can't see any architectural merit in that. I'm sure it's a passive house, it would be environmentally very friendly. I'm certain after 3 years, an awful lot of thought and consideration has gone into it. But it seems that if you come up with something like this, it's a reason for a departure from the local plan. I share the board members' concerns on that. And to me, it does nothing at all from a design point of view. Although it probably is sustainable within its own setting. But sustainability has been mentioned, and that's another concern I would have. I don't feel I can support this. I've been struggling with it to find some merit, and apart from the passive house principle, and maybe the landscaping, I can't find anything that would make me want to support this.
Okay, thank you. Any further speakers before we ask for a proposal? Councillor Bloxham.
Thank you. I'm going to be completely opposite to everybody else because I'm a fan of contemporary architecture. So I can see no issues with it at all. I think I agree with the design review panel. I could happily live there myself looking at that. Having said that, when I read the report, the concern that stood out to me as Councillor Matt Hall was the airport's concerns, and I don't understand why that report was not provided before. So I'm still sort of hovering about where I am on it because of the airport concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can see even a small wildlife pond could attract a heron, for instance, which could then fly up. They often fly quite high. So that could increase the risk of bird strike. I'd have thought if they got rid of that pond, actually the wildlife pond, it might be a better idea because nothing's going to be attracted to those reflecting pools. They're not going to be attractive to wildlife, but I can see that might be. Councillor Haggerty.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm going to be a second one to do it. Sorry, I like it. Yeah, I would live there. However, it's not one I can support. I do believe the people have done a lot of work on it for where it is and sustainability and walking and things like that. I believe they could have an electric car because obviously there's going to be electric points in it. But I think biggest disappointment in it is exactly the same as Councillor Hall. Before it come to council, this airport report should have been done so we can look at this and have a proper consideration. For that reason alone, I couldn't support it today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barlow.
If you're ready to make a proposal, Chair, I would say that we do not support this because we don't believe that this design is of and again, I just want to say, I like the design. I just don't think it is truly exceptional. I don't think it meets the criteria for the NPPF 84 that this would, first of all, I don't think it's truly outstanding. And I don't think it would significantly enhance its immediate setting. And then also the health and safety issues of the airport. I don't know what we could use as a reason for that, but I'm sure the officers will know what they might be able to pin that to. And also, I don't know if there's anything on noise, because again, to me, quiet enjoyment is part of, as Councillor Hall said, part of the enjoyment of a garden in your property is to have peace and quiet. The people that live there now might be used to it, but in the future, this is going to be a really expensive house. And what you're saying, if this is so exceptional, who are they going to sell it to in the future? Where is the future of this house for someone to truly enjoy it? Anyway, that's what I propose.
Okay, so you're proposing refusal. Yeah. Just a check. Can I have a seconder then? Councillor Brian Bailey? You're you're seconding?
Yes, please, Chair.
Okay.
The reasons I quoted earlier, Chair, not particularly the labour ones, the sustainability or the lack of it.
Yeah, the location.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so, you know, probably got location, amenity of the residents. The fact it's in an unsustainable location, I think Councillor Bailey raised that one. We don't feel the design is sufficiently distinctive. Okay, so we have a proposer and seconder, and proposing refusal.
Are officers happy with those recommendations? I mean, is that enough?
Those reasons for refusal. Mrs. Ormsby scribbling away here, so they're just writing down. Does anybody, I mean, we don't need to pile in too many, but are there any other overriding reasons for refusal that you'd like to add? Councillor Haggerty.
Health and safety re the airport, Chair.
Yeah. Although that one is conditioned. I mean, that was covered by condition. That the management plan had to be submitted, and I think run past the airport as well, wasn't it? Okay. So, are you happy with those?
Yes.
Well, probably not happy, but
So, well, I understand what the reasons, I believe I understand what the reasons are. I mean, effectively, it's an unsustainable location of development within the countryside, which would result in an increased need to travel by private car to access facilities. And it is not justified by paragraph 138 of the paragraph 84 of the MPPF as having regard to the this wording needs refining, but having regard to the design and the noise levels within the site, the development is not truly outstanding, does not reflect the highest standards of architecture, would not help to raise standards of design, and would not significantly enhance its immediate setting. So effectively, the fact that you don't believe it meets the criteria, but I suppose my question is, do you believe it doesn't meet any of the criteria in paragraph 84, or all of them that I've set out? So because obviously these would be issues which would be discussed at an appeal if one is lodged. So the question is it truly outstanding is one aspect. Does it reflect the highest standards of architecture? Would it help to raise standards of design more generally in rural areas? So that's the first part. Do you think it does any of those? Or do you feel that it fails in all those regards? And then secondly, would it significantly enhance its immediate setting? And would it be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the local area? So do you feel it fails on both of those second points? I've heard comment about it not enhancing. I haven't heard so much about it not being sensitive to the defining characteristics of the local area.
I believe it does. It doesn't.
It doesn't. So
to both of those things. I mean, again, there are parts of the building, I'm sure, like this, they were talking about the different, so they're doing a battery thing, but they're also doing a plasma something or other. I don't even know what that is, but I'm sure that is exceptional and something that is cutting edge. But again, that's one little thing that I don't think outweighs the harm that it's doing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's exceptional aspects to the building, but I think I agree. It doesn't particularly reference local architecture or anything very much locally, apart from the use of oak and a reference to the tumbling weir at Ottery St Mary.
And I think the words in here are, is truly outstanding. Not just outstanding, truly outstanding. And again, the second would significantly enhance, not just enhance. So these are a step above. And I don't think this does that to that area.
Okay, so in which case then, that reason would be wrapping around the fact that you don't feel it meets any of the criteria in paragraph 84E. And then a third reason for refusal, it's not been demonstrated that the development would not create, would not attract additional wildlife, and therefore could pose a health and safety hazard to users of Exeter Airport.
Yeah.
I believe it was detrimental to the area if it was built. I can't see it enhancing, so therefore, in my opinion, it would be detrimental to the character of the area.
Okay, well, I think that's kind of the other side of it's not enhancing, and therefore that's part of para 84, isn't it? Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I actually think that would be a separate issue. If we, so at the moment, the reasons for refusal are that it is in an unsustainable location and doesn't meet the criteria of paragraph 84E to justify development in an isolated rural setting. So that is not the same as saying that we think there will actually be harm arising to the local landscape and character of the area. If members feel that that is the case, then that would be an additional reason for refusal. But I mean, at the end of the day, the fundamental issue that any planning inspector is going to be looking at is this justified by paragraph 84E? Because I think it's clear, we all recognise, and the applicant recognises that this would the only relevant, that's the relevant point which would justify approving it. I think the Exeter Airport matter is relevant. Members feel that they don't feel that could be satisfactorily addressed by planning condition. But I think that the crux of this is going to be, does it meet para 84E?
As we were once told by a very wise man that we shouldn't put too many in there, it'd be better to just put the strong ones in there. And I believe that we've put those down already. And by putting something else is, again, it's not a special area, it's not an AOMB or anything like that. So I would just leave it at the ones that were originally said, if that's acceptable for the seconder.
Okay, so basically we're saying it doesn't meet any of the criteria in paragraph 84. Councillor Ann Hall.
Thank you, Chair. The height of the building and the lighting at night, I think, will be detrimental to the area as well as for wildlife and the bats, etc. So, and it will show up in the night sky, and I don't think that's wise in a rural aspect.
Okay.
There was a lighting assessment submitted with the application that concluded that the lights bill wouldn't go beyond the boundaries of the site, and also Ecology haven't raised any issue in that respect. So I don't know whether that would be sufficient grounds for refusal on that basis.
Okay. I think if we stick to paragraph 84 and just ensure that we've dealt with each of the points in that. Okay, in that case, we have reasons to refuse. We have a proposal to refuse, been seconded, so we'll go to a vote. Those in favour of refusal? Okay, those against? Okay, and abstentions? Councillor Howe and Councillor Haggerty. Thanks, Del. Okay, so that one is refused. Okay, we're definitely in a refusing mood this morning. Okay, shall we try and get one more in before lunch? Yes. Because we were concerned that we'd romp through these 4 applications and morning, Simon. So we'll do one more before lunch. Okay, 5 minutes, and we'll deal with one more and have lunch. Has anybody seen Councillor Faithful in their travels? I don't think so. His bag's still here.
That's correct.
So I'll go and have a quick look through, and then I can finish my quiz.
Yeah, I think we'll just have to.
Oh, here we
Oh,
go.
there he is. We were getting worried, Peter. Okay, I'll just check whether any of the late arrivals, Councillor Howell, Councillor Smith, whether you've got any declarations. No, I declared lobbying over the Gilbrook one on everybody's behalf. Okay, so we're going to do one more before lunch. So this is, I get it. Oh yeah, this is item 10, 241491 FUL, site of Penny Park, Kersbrook Lane, Kersbrook, pages 85 to 112 on your agenda pack, and Jill Hemsworth is presenting the report again.
Thank you very much. Do we have the report on screen? So the application before us is a property in Kersbrook Lane, Kersbrook. So it's the demolition of an existing dwelling and the replacement with a 4-bedroom dwelling, including a new driveway. The application is before the Planning Committee as the officer recommendation of refusal is in conflict with comments received from the local ward councillor. So this is the application site here, which is Penny Park. It's an existing 5-bedroom dwelling dating from the 1930s. It's accessed off Kersbrook Lane, which is an unclassified lane between two sections of the B3178, and it's just to the north of Budleigh Salterton. It is within the East Devon National Landscape, and the site is also 300 metres southwest of Grade 2 star listed Tidwell Manor. So this is a wider context showing the application site. So the existing dwelling is here. The built-up area boundary of Budleigh Salterton is along here, just 400 metres to the south of the site, and there's the Grade 2 star listed Tidwell Barton over here. So the application seeks approval for the demolition of the existing 5-bedroom dwelling on site and the replacement of the existing building with a 4-bedroom dwelling on the site. So policy H6 of the local plan allows for the replacement of dwellings within the countryside where the dwelling is on or adjacent to the footprint or elsewhere on the site where there are clear planning benefits, and in addition the proposal must not be harmful to the national landscape. The previous application 22/2646 CPE established that the house on the site had not been abandoned, and therefore there is a legal dwelling on the site at the moment. So the application, the current curtilage of the site is this section here, and the application also seeks change of use of this section of the site, which is about 1,700 square metres, to allow for the creation of a new driveway into the site. So in terms of the existing house is approximately 180 square metres. It's a 5-bedroom dwelling. The applicants state that this isn't big enough by current standards. However, in terms of the national minimum space standards, that is significantly bigger than a current minimum standards for a 5-bedroom house. The replacement dwelling is a Georgian-style house. So it's a 2-storey dwelling with single-storey wings and a double garage. So in comparison to the existing building, the total area of the dwelling is 415 square metres, and the overall built form is 40 metres width, although it's acknowledged that only the 13-metre central section is 2-storey. But in comparison with the existing footprint of the dwelling on the site, which is 10 metres wide, the proposal represents a large extension of the existing built footprint. In terms of the site location and the position of the house in the site is elevated above the road by about approximately 5 metres, and the existing house is nestled into the slope. So in terms of extending the footprint of the house, the proposal extends backwards with this new retaining element at the rear, but the house really can only extend sideways, which is why the proposal has ended up being significantly wider than the existing house on the site. So you can see the red line sections of the existing house compared to the proposed dwelling. So the site is having to be built up at the front to allow for a pathway around the front of the house, and then there's also significant excavation at the rear of the site to allow for the larger footprint. And again, there's further sections there. So the new driveway is required because the proposed house takes up more of the site. There's no space for turning using the existing drive. So a new drive is proposed on the land to the west of the site, which again will be elevated above the road and would be potentially quite a prominent feature in the landscaping. There is an existing hedge in front of the site, which would screen the hedge. A tree report has been submitted with the report, which says that the hedge would be coppiced or laid to promote the health of the hedge. But then later on in the report, it does say that this is to the eastern end of the site only, so the hedge would remain in front of the house. The landscape officer's comments on the application centre around the fact that the hedge in front of the house would be coppiced, but the applicant has confirmed this would only be to the eastern end of the hedge, and the hedge in front of the house would be retained. Again, the landscape officer commented that there would be pressure for the hedge to be trimmed to allow for views out. But the applicant has said they would prefer privacy rather than a view. However, there do remain concerns that in terms of the longevity and the health of that hedge, whether it would require coppicing at some point, and in which case the proposal would become a lot more prominent in the view. There's the existing house down there behind the hedge, which is quite outgrown. And again, the proposal, which shows it would be hidden behind the hedge. Whether that would remain in perpetuity remains to be seen. In terms of the landscape characteristics of the site, it's in area landscape character type 5D, which is estate wooded farmland, which is a predominantly pastoral farmland with undulating topography. So you can see from the existing site photograph, the existing house, it nestles quite neatly into the contours of the site. So the new driveway would come through the gap in the hedge here and would extend along the field, and then also, so the main 2-storey portion of the dwelling would be slightly larger than the existing building, and then you'd also have the single-storey wings extending to either side of that. So that's the existing farm access where the new access drive is proposed. Again, the landscape officers raised concerns regarding the extent of any retaining required to facilitate the new driveway because of the change in level, and obviously any entrance to there would have to be a hard consolidated surface such as concrete to allow cars to get up there and to prevent mud running onto the road. So that's the existing driveway up to the house. In line with Highways comments, the existing driveway would be infilled using trees to block that up. The existing house is a day roost for several species of bats, and so the proposals include mitigation in the form of a new shed within the garden, which these bats would be relocated into, which would be controlled by condition. The proposal would facilitate the succession of a farming business that employs 30 people. However, there are concerns that the existing house is already larger than minimum base standards would require, and the existing house would again be over 3 times larger than the minimum space standards for a 4-bedroom dwelling. This is the view back from the site, looking back towards Budleigh Salterton. And again, the view back from the site, looking towards Tidwell Manor. Obviously, this photograph was taken in the summer, so you can't see Tidwell Manor, it's behind the trees. The proposal has been significantly revised since it was first received, and the wings have been reduced to a single story. Historic England originally objected to the proposal on the grounds that the dwelling had the potential to challenge the hierarchical primacy of Tidwell Manor, but however, they have stated now that the revised proposal would not do so, and therefore they have no objection. They have, however, stated that the hard and soft landscaping around the house would need careful consideration to ensure that the development blends into its context. So in summary, the proposed dwelling is significantly larger than the house on the site in terms of both its area and its built footprint. The overall footprint extends to 40-metre length against a 10-metre length at the moment on the site. Policy H6 of the local plan states that there are circumstances where the footprint can be changed, but only where a planning or environmental benefit can be achieved. The applicants contend that the proposal would help succession planning of an existing farm, but given the great weight placed in the NPPF on the protection of the national landscape and the extent of the footprint proposed in this prominent location, we feel that the benefits would not outweigh the harm to the landscape, and therefore the application is recommended for refusal.
Okay, thank you, Jill. So we'll hear from a supporter now, Mrs. Di Wastenage. How do you pronounce that? I'll let you correct me when you get to the mic.
Did it work? I think there's a comment from the councillor. Would you like that first?
No, we'll
Mine first.
We'll hear from you and Mr. Trotter first, and then we'll hear the ward members.
Lovely. Brilliant. So thank you. Our family are second-generation dairy farmers. We farmed at Tidwell Barton, next door to Tidwell Manor, since 1965. We've got one farmhouse, and both of our sons, now back in the key roles in the business, were naturally planning for succession. Penny Park was a 5-bedroom detached property built for a local businessman, and it stands today as it was built in 1904. Not occupied for over 35 years, it's derelict, structurally unsound, and not capable of refurbishment. However, it's perfectly located, being close to the existing farm buildings and surrounded by our farmland. So it was purchased to become a working farmhouse. Our planning journey started in 21 with pre-apps and different planning officers, each one expressing a slightly different view. Nevertheless, we have continuously evolved the design to meet their concerns, and we now have the support of the local residents, parish council, local councillor, Historic England. So this now leaves this subjective issue around scale and impact on the national landscape. The planning officer suggests we can achieve all our objectives simply by refurbishing the original. This is simply not the case. Firstly, the existing property doesn't have any bathrooms, cloakrooms, utility, plant room, office or garaging. To add these and meet current building standards and regulations, it would naturally have a larger footprint. Secondly, to function as a farmhouse, we need space for a farm office and a meeting room, boot room, dog kennels, storage areas, etc. As Penny Park itself sits on a plateau, but the landscape rising behind the property is not affected by the design, so the property will continue to nestle within the landscape as it does today. It will be no more prominent than the original dwelling, and the 3 photo montages demonstrate this. This is in stark contrast to the modern housing developments opposite that were approved in the same national landscape setting. So the main 2-storey element of the house sits at the same ground level, sits within the same ridge height as the original. Yes, it is 3 metres wider. However, the main bulk of the increase in floor space in this part of the build is deliberately located at the rear and not visible from the west. The single-storey extensions have been reduced, redesigned, recessed, and screened by the wagon shed to the northwest and existing hedgerows and trees to the south. Cladding the wagon shed with wood to resemble an agricultural building, i.e. something you would expect to see in the open countryside, was also suggested by a previous planning officer. The current driveway was a later addition and never used by anyone actually living in the house. It doesn't function as you can only drive in one way and you can't turn the other direction. So various access options were considered with the previous planning officer. And it's this option, using the existing gateway, buying a bit of field off our landlord, using a stone track and siting it as close as possible to the hedgerow, was considered an acceptable approach, as it would resemble an agricultural track and retain that rural field. To conclude, our family has farmed this landscape in partnership with the environment for over 60 years, managing lakes, ponds, bees, beavers, planting trees, hedgerows. Having been recognised with national awards, we would never do anything to harm the landscape we love. We very much hope the committee will recognise everything we've done to design a scheme that strikes the right balance between meeting the functional needs of the business while protecting the rural character and landscape of the area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear now from Mr. Andrew Trotter. Is he here? Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me come and speak in support of this application. I've lived locally in Budleigh Salterton now for over 40 years. I know the area well, and I do know the Wassenich family. When we first heard about the struggle, if you like, that they were having in terms of obtaining approval, a good number of us locally felt we really wanted to come and speak, and I was the one, if you like, pushed forward to voice some of those opinions. As I say, I know the area well, I know the lane, it's a quiet country lane, it's a very pretty lane, and I certainly know the existing building. The existing building, without question, is an eyesore. It has been unoccupied for over 30 years, and it's begging or crying out for sympathetic redevelopment, and I believe this is what the proposal is. In terms of the area around the property, you know, I'm a great fan of not disturbing the environment, and speaking to both Peter and Di, I know their intention as farmers. They spend all of their professional life planting and maintaining hedgerows, trees, plantations, and it's certainly their intention to follow any recommendations or guidelines suggested in terms of planting, maintaining the hedgerow, natural species plantation of trees, etc., to ensure that the development is sympathetic and very much sits within the landscape. I've looked at the plot. The existing house stands on a level plot. There is no intention or proposal to increase the size of that actual standing. The current plan, I think, sits well within the existing level area, and I believe it will blend in, and I very much believe this is an improvement into that area. Yes, I accept the building itself will be larger, but much of that development will be single story and sit behind the hedge, i.e. it will be screened from the road, from the public. Really, I think Di has said many of the points that I was going to touch on, and looking at the time, probably going to call it a close now. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make it clear before we hear the ward members, we're not going to hear the item 11 before lunch. So we are going to have a short lunch break, and then we will consider item 11. That's just so you're not kept waiting for too long. We were hoping to get through it this morning, but we're going to have to defer it to this afternoon, but hopefully it won't be too much longer. But just to let you know, if you want to go off and have some lunch, we're not likely to hear it until probably about 2 o'clock. Okay. Yes, so Amanda's going to read the submission from Councillor Henry Riddell.
Thank you for the opportunity to have my statement read out today. Officers are recommending refusal of this application, but I urge the committee to consider the context, community support and the measures taken to address concerns during this process. Penny Park has been derelict since 1990, significantly detracting from the surrounding area, especially impacting Tidwell House. The property has become a hotspot for antisocial behaviour, creating a negative impression for those travelling along the B3178. This application seeks permission to demolish the existing building beyond economic repair and replace it with a new dwelling. The new house will occupy the same location as the original, with a larger footprint to accommodate the family needs, including functional farm aspects. The design respects the local character, incorporating traditional materials that reflect the area's history and heritage. The revised proposal features a 40% reduction in footprint from earlier plans and maintains the original ridge height to blend into the landscape. The local parish council and 9 residents have submitted written support for this application, underlying a community desire to see the site restored. The replacement dwelling will not only serve as a family home, but also support a farming business, aligning with the national and local policies that promote economic sustainability in rural areas. Historic England initially expressed concerns about the proposal's potential impact on Tidwell Manor. However, the applicant has worked extensively to address these, resulting in Historic England's latest response, indicating their concerns can be mitigated through planning conditions. Importantly, the proposed design will sit below the skyline of surrounding hills and trees. Substantial screening with existing vegetation will further minimise visual impacts, preserving the area's natural beauty. Officers have raised concerns with the proposal's scale and impact on the East Devon national landscape. However, I would argue that the revised plans demonstrate a sensitive and scaled back approach. If this committee has any doubts, I urge you to visit the site. Observing the current dereliction firsthand will highlight the pressing need for change and how this proposal balances development with sensitivity to its surroundings. This application offers a well-considered and much-needed solution to a long-standing issue. I recommend approval of this application. Thank you. And that's Councillor Henry Riddell, the ward member.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions? Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Could we please get clarification about this wagon shed? What sort of wagons are they planning to put in it? Because you ain't going to get a tractor in that. And the 2 chimneys, I assume one of them is a false chimney because there's nothing underneath it.
Any other? Yeah, Anne Hall.
Thank you, Chair. It was stated at the moment the house, which is currently there, occupies 180 square metres. The proposed is 415 square metres. But does that actually take into account the size of the garage within that square meterage? If so, can we have it divided out, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And councillor Barlow.
Well, it just says that councillor Riddell is stating that been reduced, or the town council is saying it's been reduced to 304 metres squared. So going back to councillor Hall's, what's the true figure? Because again, I've looked up the average for a 4 or 5 bedroom house, and that seems quite reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll take those three, Jill, if we can.
In terms of the wagon shed and the proposed parking, perhaps the applicant could answer that.
Apologies, a bit of a farming term really, single storey garage, but we always call it a wagon shed. But it's not for wagons, it's for cars. And then part of the plant room will be at the back of it because that's what we had to take off the original design. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then going back to the other questions, yes, there's 2 chimneys. So one of them is from the fireplace in the ground floor kitchen, and the second one is a false chimney, which doesn't respond to anything in the plan. In terms of the area of the proposed dwelling, so the existing house is 180 square metres. The proposed area of the current house is 415 square metres. 50 square metres of that is the garage, so the house is 365 square metres.
Okay. Yeah, councillor Barlow.
Can we just explain that? Sorry, have the town council got it totally wrong then? Because they've got, although the footprint was reduced slightly from 340 to 304, it still represents 3.4 times of the existing property. Is that wrong, right?
Those figures are taken from the SIL form from the planning application.
Yours or theirs?
My figures are taken from the SIL form. And
So we've got several figures here. I think I had 365. And now we've got 342 and 304.
so yeah, so the 8 by 7 garage, so that's approximately 50 square metres internal dimensions, and then the house is 365 square metres.
Okay, so it is 365, and that includes the offices, presumably, and boot rooms and things like that, yeah.
So 365 includes the bedrooms, the offices, everything apart from the garage.
Okay. So, any further questions? Councillor Faithful, then Councillor Jenny.
The applicants are suggesting that their family are taking over the farming. So isn't this sounds to me more like a retirement home rather than a farmer's dwelling, because the farm house is still being occupied by the family. Is that correct?
Well, the application isn't for a rural kind of dwelling in that sense anyway. It's a demolition of an existing building and rebuild. I don't think the issue of who's actually going to occupy it is relevant. Am I correct?
So I think it is an important factor for members to consider that the applicant does farm the adjoining land and says that they want this because they want an additional dwelling for sort of, yes, the family, sons are coming into the business. However, there is no proposal that this is permitted as an agricultural workers dwelling, so there would be no occupancy restriction. So this, once approval is granted, the site could be, I'm not saying it would be, but it could be sold on and occupied by another person who has no connection to the adjoining land. So we just have to bear this in mind, that it is a proposal for an open market dwelling, an open market replacement dwelling, and that's the sort of the policy context that we need to consider it under.
And we can't condition that it has to be used in association with the farm?
If members felt that the only reason that the dwelling was acceptable was because it was providing an agricultural worker's dwelling, then a condition could be put on it. However, we haven't got any of the usual information that we would normally have in support of an agricultural worker's dwelling, which is demonstrating the functional need for that additional dwelling. So it would be unusual to put such a condition on without the evidence. If that was the only reason it was to be supported, we haven't got the usual evidence that we would be looking at.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Are we in debate, sorry, or not?
If that's not a question, but Councillor Jenny Brown, did you have a question?
What was the derelict house originally?
It was a 5-bedroom dwelling.
I think the applicant said it was built by a local businessman. Yeah.
It was a dwelling.
It was a private house. It wasn't used in association with the farm, I don't think. Okay, if there's no more questions, then yes, Councillor Barlow, we'll go into debate. Fire away.
Thank you, Chair. It's funny, the last time the officers were for something that the parish council, everyone was against, this time it's the other way around, and you're turning something down. A 5-bedroom house, so technically, sustainability, five people, families, 5 bedrooms, you're saying, could live there in that site, and now we're cutting it down to 4, and it looks better. I drive past that about once a month, I should think, and it's funny how it always sticks out, this ugly, dirty, brown, reddy brown building. And I just don't see that this is going to be detrimental to the landscape at that point. And I think it will be improvement, as everyone says. And I don't quite understand why we're not supporting it. And again, your report here, you've got the parish town council saying one thing, you're saying different thing. I believe you, obviously, because you're our officers on the size of it. But again, if you look up a 4 or 5 bedroom house, the average size in the UK, between 300 and 700 metres as the average.
The minimum, sorry, can I interject there? The minimum space standards for a 4-bedroom house is 124 square metres. I don't know where your figure
But
is.
that's the minimum standard.
Yeah.
I did say the average, so the average.
I don't know where your...
Well, no, sorry, for a 5-bedroom house, I said, so. Where am I getting it from? The internet. Local authority building.
A reliable source of information.
Absolutely, yeah, and depends where you look, I know. So I just, again, I don't quite understand why we are so anti this. The road going off it, yes, there is a new access going in that is going to be paved, but then we're blocking one up that is, again, an access off there. So, yes, okay. It's a not very much used lane. You are supporting, and I know we haven't got restrictions on this, but knowing the proximity of the farm over there, it would make sense if you've got two children want to run a farm. But you're right, it possibly could be sold in the future. Yeah, I would happily support this rather than put it down for refusal.
Okay, thank you. I'll just point out the reasons for refusal are because it's not compliant with the local plan, simply in terms of the footprint, that it is much larger than the building that's been demolished. That, I think, that is the main objection.
And also the landscape impact to the national landscape because of the extent of the built footprint.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. I was intrigued by Councillor Barlow's comment about this great brick thing. Well, my understanding of the new house is that it's going to be built out of brick to match what's there already. So we're going to have something brick-wise, much the same, only bigger. And so I don't see how pulling this thing down is going to, it's not going to take that away. It's just going to get us something even bigger than that. Anyway, there we go.
I think it's more to do with the fact it's derelict and looks it from the outside. Councillor Colin Brown.
Yeah, I mean, in our local plan, we've got no minimum size or anything, have we, for any type of building? And there's nothing in there that says how large something can be extended, how much something can be extended. There's no policy for it at all.
I think there is, was it policy H6? That determines what you can replace.
Doesn't give a size, though.
No, because the NPPF has nationally described minimum space standards, but the provision in H6 is simply that it should be at or close to the original footprint. No, that's right. It doesn't say volume, just footprint. So you can take a bungalow and turn it into a 2-storey house, and we've had quite a few of those, I think, particularly in West Hill. I sometimes think, should we be looking at volume rather than simply footprint? But I think this is both, actually.
So just coming back on that, so the reference to the nationally described space standards is just giving an example of what the minimum size is considered to be a reasonable space for people to live in if they were creating a 5-bedroomed house. You're right, there is generally, we have no upper limit on house sizes, and we look at the site specifics. The reason that the officer's been citing that is that the applicant has been arguing that they need a house this big because to meet modern standards, it's not reasonable to live within a smaller home, because part of the discussions have been, I think there's a recognising that the principle of redeveloping this site would be in accordance, it's supported by policy H6. The concern is the scale, the extent of the increase in size and the manner in which it's being done. Because the site is so, is not very deep, the extensions are very linear. So rather than just increasing the overall mass or going out more towards the back, it's all in one straight line. So visually, that gives the impression of a much greater increase in size than if you were perhaps, as I say, doing rear extensions, etc. And we are in the national landscape where great weight has to be given to conserving and enhancing the national landscape. So that's the context for the reasoning that the officer has been highlighting the fact that, that this is significantly more than a house needs to be to provide a comfortable amount of accommodation for somebody who wants to build a 4-bedroomed house on the site.
I mean, I don't class this as a large house that they're building. It's smaller than mine that I live in the middle of town. It's not big at all in my book.
I think it's all relative. I think there's plenty of people who live in considerably smaller homes. Maybe it's time to think of downsizing.
It's similar in size to the smaller of the 2 houses we were looking at in Lympstone, actually. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I personally don't think it's a problem. The height of the proposed development is going to be similar to what's there. And with the screening of the new trees that we planted in the old driveway, I think you wouldn't see much of it at all. I've lived in Budley most of my life, and I'm very familiar with this building. And it is, to all intents and purposes, an eyesore. But I think it'd be an improvement to the area. And especially with the wings either side, it's at low level. It's not going to be seen. It's not going to be detrimental at all. So I'm very much in favour of it, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Madhall.
Can I just clarify H6, please? Because I'm reading this very differently to what officers are reading this. Because it says the replacement dwelling is located on or adjacent to the footprint of the existing dwelling. It does not say it has to be the same size as the existing footprint. It doesn't say that.
In terms of the footprint though, it extends 4 times the width of the existing building, and there is no clear planning benefit that supports such an extension to the footprint.
But we could argue that a new building is of benefit because it replaces a derelict building. A bit tenuous, but I don't think it's as simple as saying it's a bigger footprint, because to me that is not what our policy says.
Through you, Chair, if you don't mind, I think we're having to look at this in the round. It's acknowledging, so yes, it is on the footprint, it overlaps the footprint, but it extends significantly beyond that. But it's reading it also in the context with with point 4, that it does not detract from the appearance and character of the landscape, and within the East Devon and AONB harm the natural beauty of the landscape. And because of the increase in size and scale of the dwelling, the officer opinion is that this is going to be harmful in the landscape by introducing such a quantum of additional built form. And in addition, the extension to the residential curtilage to enable the access is also is encroaching the residential sort of built up area into the landscape. So I think that in itself, just that extension of residential curtilage is harmful. So then you're looking at what are the benefits of this, relative to the harm, and the officer view is that the harm is going to be significant, bearing in mind we are in the national landscape, and as such this is recommended for refusal. So that's 2 elements: the scale and the extension of the residential curtilage is a very important aspect of this as to how that's going to affect that part of what is currently an open field.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Howe?
Are we in debate yet, or still questions?
We are, no. Well, we're getting a bit of both at the moment, but we are in debate.
Right, if we're in debate, then I'll move approval of this application. Contrary to officers, I would also recommend that we remove any permitted development rights from said application because of the sensitivity of the site. But in disagreement with officers, I cannot see the harm to the AONB or the National Landscape as we're now calling it. It is extremely well screened site, very minimal impact. It reuses a redundant brownfield site as such for housing, and as such I cannot see the harm. And I'm happy to propose that from here.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I just say, is it possible with the trees that instead of a 5-year, we put 10-year? Because I know the town council was a little bit concerned about them being upkept.
I would suggest we actually ask for tree preservation orders on all the trees on that hedge instead of that, because you can't really mess around with years.
Bow to your superior knowledge.
TPOs is a better way to go. That was seconded by Councillor Madhall just before you, actually, Ian. And Councillor Faithful?
Thank you, Chair. I tend not to be in support of that. I tend to be leaning towards the officers. To me, the talk is about what the need for, I know it's not an agricultural building, but that's the whole point of it. What is being proposed is what they want rather than what they need. They don't need a master bedroom with a ensuite bathroom and a dressing room and all that. Is that a need? That's, to me, it's a want. And the size and scale of the building is what they want rather than what they need. So, I mean, I don't know, I find it hard to go along with this, so anyway.
Okay. So if we have no further speakers, we can go to a vote. So the proposal is for approval. Well, just point out we're going to need some reasons for that approval in terms of the local plan. I think we need. Oh, it was you, Mike. Yeah, if we could have some reasons.
Well, the reason's quite simple. We disagree with officers. We do not see the harm to the AONB. Otherwise, it is a replacement building in every other shape and form. Being as there is no harm to the natural landscape, I'll get the terminology right in a minute, there is no reason to refuse, pure and simple.
Okay, thank you. So it's a replacement building. We're not concerned about the fact it's somewhat bigger in footprint. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree that the fact that the wings have been taken down to 1 story means they will be adequately screened, and therefore the main part of the house, it will look pretty much like a replacement, and therefore there's no harm to the AONB. Okay, are we satisfied with those as reasons for approval?
Yes, the reasons are clear. The only thing I would just want to make members aware of, that there is no guarantee that the trees can be TPO'd, because they need to meet certain criteria. They need to be assessed by our arboriculturalists, so they, you know, that may not be achievable.
Okay, thank you. Of course, it may be in the interest of the house in terms of screening to retain that. But I agree that there's no guarantee that those trees will remain and that it may not become more visible in future. However, bearing all that in mind, oh yes, we'll have to delegate conditions to the chair and ward members. Okay, so we have a proposal to approve. So all in favour? Nine, I get. Yeah. Those against? 1. And abstentions? 2. Okay. Thank you, members. In that case, that is approved, and we will now break for lunch. We will. Is it really 1:45? Good Lord. Okay, we'll reconvene at 2:15 to consider item 10 and the subsequent one. Sorry, 11.